And we'll sing a song together before we begin our next assembly. Should we sing, or are you gonna give them an announcement?
We will be resuming in just a moment. Jonathan has agreed to play some music, traveling music, for you to get to your seats and sit down. And we'll resume shortly. Thank you, Jonathan.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Jonathan Rundman. I'm from Minneapolis, and I love being in Nebraska. Yeah. This is so nice. You guys are singing so beautifully out there. It's really great. And I have a feeling that I'm going to see some of you in a month, because I'm going to be in Houston, Texas, playing music at the ELCA Youth Gathering. Yeah, so raise your hand if you are going to be there yourself. Oh, yeah, really? The bishop's going too. Awesome. So if you're going to be there, come see me. Raise your hand if your congregation is sending someone to the youth gathering. Wow, look at the numbers out there. Great. So we're gonna warm up with a youth gathering song. This is from John chapter 15. Let's learn the words. It goes like this. This is my commandment, that you love one another. As I have loved you, as I've loved you. Now the second part has actions. Do them with me. No one has greater love than this. Now let's do that together 2 times. No one has greater love than this. No one has greater love than this. And then it ends like this: to lay down one's life for one's friends. And then you hold hands with your friends. Awesome. So that's the song, that's the actions, and I'm going to sing it for you. And I think I should be joined on the stage by, 5 or 6 people who are going to be in Houston. So run up here super fast. Time's a-wasting. Sprint. I need some helpers, Houston people. Let me sing you the song. It goes like this. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you, as I have loved you. Then it repeats. This is my commandment, that you love one another. Yeah! As I have loved you, as I have loved. Here's the actions. No one has greater love than this. No one has greater love than this. No one has greater love than this. Yeah, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends. So this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you, as I have loved you. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you, as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this. No one has greater love than this. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends. So this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you, as I have loved you. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you, as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this. No one has greater love than this. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. This is your last chance to sing it. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you, as I have loved you. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you, as I have loved you. Oh yeah! How about a hand for my assistants? You guys rule. We'll see you in Houston. Ow!
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, volunteers. Actually, Nebraska Synod is sending over 800 participants to the youth gathering this summer. So give yourselves a hand. At this time, it's my pleasure and privilege to reintroduce to you Bill Horn, the Vice President of the ELCA. Derek gave you some of his bio this morning earlier. You've heard from him and about him. I will not go on and on, though I did tell the Synod Council yesterday that I think Bill Horn is one of the best things to happen to the ELCA since Elizabeth Eaton. Because I have, as a liaison bishop to the ELCA Church Council, have gotten to watch Bill in action. Bill is an outstanding lay leader. He speaks of the ELCA with a passion that comes only, it seems, or primarily from those who come to the ELCA as an adult and weren't born into it, who recognizes who this church is, what it does, and whose it is. Bill is also not afraid to ask questions, even hard questions, of institutions and of bodies and of bishops and of people. Questions that have to do with us serving the gospel faithfully and well. And he's just been an outstanding representative for the church. He's a gift to the church, and he's a gift to the Nebraska Synod. Bill, come on over. Thanks for being here. Thank you, man.
Brian. Thank you. Well, how are you all this afternoon? So you realize what my task is. I've got to keep you from going to sleep. You know, you had this great meal, and I thought it was a good meal, right? Right? I'm definitely a chicken guy, so I really enjoyed that. So let me get started, and they've given me plenty of time, and I'll be a good steward with that time. I bring you greetings on behalf of our presiding bishop, Elizabeth Eaton, our secretary, Chris Berger, and our treasurer, Lori Feddick. Feddick has not been with us long as a treasurer, but a very highly qualified person, professional in her field, and we are so blessed that she is our treasurer. It is truly an honor for me to be the church-wide rep at the Nebraska Synod Assembly. Bishop Moss and I met as he became a liaison bishop. We got to know each other, and at some point in time, he said, Bill, I really would like for you to come to our Synod Assembly. And I was just thrilled, you know, with that personal invitation. The way the ELCA makes assignments, I don't get a vote. The bishop can request, and then we see how the process rolls out. And so when I got a call indicating that Nebraska Synod was one of the places that I was going, I made my personal work schedule fit because I definitely wanted to be here. So let me begin with a prayer. The Lord be with you. Dear God, we are reminded that we are an Easter people. Walk with the Nebraska Synod as it serves the communities throughout the state. Bless the rostered ministers and lay leaders and give them boundless energy to do their work. Bless this assembly and give it wisdom in its decision-making. I ask all these blessings in your holy name. Amen. I have found it very helpful as a lay leader to begin our gatherings in prayer. It helps to center us. It helps to center me, make sure my feet are on the ground, and so that I can do the work that I've been called to do. I have to share a story that my wife shared with me. She's somewhere in here. I'm not real sure where. But as yesterday when I was meeting with the Synod Council, she was out visiting locations in Kearney. So you can imagine what that might be like, right? So she came back to the room and she said, honey, there are a lot of friendly people here. Now, you know, you have to put that in context. I mean, we have lived all over the world. We've lived in Europe. As a result of my military service, we've lived in Asia. We have lived in the southeast part of the United States. She hails from Missouri. I hail from Oklahoma. You know, so we've been around a lot of people, you know, who are friendly. But there was something really special that we've encountered since we've been here. And I just want to express my gratitude and commend you on really reflecting a level of hospitality that, we just don't see everywhere we go. And so I've got stories to tell. So wherever I go, I'm going to talk about those Nebraska people and how friendly, how genuinely friendly you are. Last year, I followed the script that the Churchwide Assembly staff provided me, and which was a 25 to 35-minute PowerPoint slide update about what your church has been up to. This year, we decided to modify our approach and use our videos more effectively and give the church-wide representatives more flexibility in what they presented. I've decided to use 2 videos and a PowerPoint presentation that allows me to emphasize themes that I believe are important to us as the ELCA as we journey through 2018. There is some homework embedded in what I'm going to present to you, so get ready for it. So here's the outline. As I said, I'll show 2 videos. The first one is the annual video that features our presiding bishop and a theme that she has been sharing with us in earnest. Please reflect on what she says and what you see in the video. I believe that you will see yourselves and symbolic examples of the work that you do throughout your Synod. The second video is the ELCA in Review 2017. This video is an attempt to provide you with an efficiently presented update of what the ELCA has accomplished, what our church has accomplished in 2017. As I said before, we are a big church that does a lot of ministry to achieve God's mission in the world. Then I will present a short PowerPoint presentation that will emphasize what your ELCA Vice President would like you to think and do something about more earnestly in 2018. So we'll begin with the presiding bishop's video.
When I am out and about the church, I often ask what is distinctly Lutheran about our witness to the gospel. Grace is almost always the answer. Many other Christian and religious traditions also claim that grace is important, if not foundational, to their self-understanding. So what do we, as the Lutheran movement, uniquely say about grace? Grace is the free gift of God. Martin Luther wrote, "Grace does so much that we are accounted completely righteous before God. For grace is not divided or parceled out, but takes us completely into favor for the sake of Christ, our intercessor and mediator." Luther is making the evangelical point about grace, that it is not up to us. Rather, it is God's good pleasure. Grace is not something God does, rather grace is who God is. This gracious God is not an abstraction, but is made known in the flesh and blood person, Jesus. Sometimes I think we have the nagging doubt that free doesn't really mean free. Some might disbelieve for joy. How is it possible that it is God's good and gracious will to give this grace? How is it possible that God can love so completely? How can I be so loved? This is a transactional world, after all. I do something for you, so you will do something for me. We either can or must do something to set the transaction in motion. It is contrary to the way of the world that so much life should be given so freely. Or somehow, we need to hedge our bets and supplement God's action. This is not new amongst the people of God. In Exodus, we see that the Israelites find themselves in the wilderness wandering and hungry. Memories of the flesh pots of Egypt had erased the bitter taste of slavery, oppression, and infanticide. So God promised bread to eat, and God promised enough. Inevitably, some gathered more, adding human agency to God's gift. These were the "there's no such thing as a free lunch" Israelites. And some gathered less, unable to believe such complete love. These were the Lutheran Israelites. My hope is that when we in the ELCA speak about grace, we will speak as true evangelicals. That God, out of an abundantly fatherly or parental love, not only created all things, including humankind, good, but God also sent Jesus as the embodiment of that very love to save us from ourselves, enduring the worst that humankind could do against God's embodied mercy, even enduring the rejection, humiliation, and shame of the cross, and raised Jesus as a demonstration and promise of God's forgiving love. Here's a good Lutheran question. What does this mean? It means that we are free. We are free from spiritual bondage, from the law's accusation and judgment, from the necessity of saving ourselves. And we are free for love and service to our neighbors. The freedom that comes from God's grace propels us into the public square. Our work in advocacy and disaster relief, ELCA World Hunger, God's Work Our Hands Sunday, all flow from the freedom we have in Christ. Luther was pretty clear when he wrote, "A Christian is Lord of all, completely free of everything. A Christian is servant of all, completely attentive to the needs of all." I have a vision of the Lutheran movement spilling out into the streets in joyful service to the world God so loves. Thousands and thousands of us in our yellow God's Work Our Hands t-shirts, engaged in our communities, bringing hope and wholeness. We can be the alternative face of Christianity in today's culture. When the world sees the church only as judging and condemning and excluding, we can show the way of God's love and mercy that are meant for all people, all. Grace means that there is no one group of people who can claim supremacy over others, since we are all equally in need of God's forgiveness and all equally recipients of God's free, generous outpouring of grace. There are Lutherans all over the world. We come in all colors and sizes. A Mighty Fortress is sung in hundreds of languages and styles. I've even heard it on bagpipes. There are more Lutherans of color in the Lutheran World Federation than there are of European descent. So if culture or cuisine don't define us, what does? It is our witness to and confidence in a gracious God who in Jesus loves us to the end. This grace is too big to be contained. It breaks the divisions that we have constructed and unites all of us into one family. So, dear church, set free by God's grace, we are sent into the world. This is only possible because we find our lives in Christ. We gather around word and sacraments, and strengthened again, we are free as church together to be church for the sake of the world.
I'm a Lutheran.
I'm a Lutheran.
Soy un luterano.
I am a Lutheran.
We are Lutheran.
Chúng chia Lutheran.
I am a Lutheran.
أنا لوثري.
So what do you think about that? I think it's really neat. Makes you feel really proud, and it really shows you what our church really looks like. The next video is the ELCA in Review 2017. Now, it's going to move along pretty quickly. It won't be as long as the past video, but you're going to have access to both videos and my presentation. So just enjoy it, and don't believe you're going to miss anything because you'll be able to get access to it. Can we have our second video?
Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, 2017 Year in Review. Future Directions. Future Directions 2025 is based on a shared trust that the future is in God's hands. It expresses what this church has collectively identified as priorities into the future. Always Being Made New, the campaign for the ELCA. $174.5 million total impact for the ELCA and its ministries, including more than $30.5 million in planned gifts. 81% of congregations currently participate. Mission support. Through our offerings, we participate in God's life-changing work in our communities and around the world. In 2017, ELCA members gave generously more than $1.7 billion in unrestricted offerings. 94.3% was stewarded by congregations, 3.1% was stewarded by synods, and 2.6% was stewarded by the ELCA churchwide organization. Faith formation. More than 180 ELCA campus ministries in the U.S., 26 ELCA-affiliated colleges and universities, 7 ELCA seminaries, nearly 100 youth participating in Youth Leadership Summit. Congregational vitality. Communities of Jesus that nurture life-changing relationships with God, one another, and the world. 151 ministries were supported with Congregational Vitality Partnership support. More than 670 leaders were trained in congregational development. 431 new ministries are currently under development. 59 new starts were approved in 2017. 56% of all new starts are among ethnic multicultural communities. 30 local mission gatherings took place around the United States. Lutheran disaster response. Our response efforts in 2017 were close to home and across the globe. 30 disaster responses in 21 countries, 17 disaster responses in 15 states, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. More than $22 million in donations from you made this work possible. ELCA World Hunger. $21.3 million raised for 518 projects that help fight hunger in 62 countries, including the U.S. This represents the largest year of direct giving to ELCA World Hunger in the program's history. Because of this growth, 9 brand new projects in 6 countries joined the fight to end hunger. Global mission. In relationship with more than 85 of the 145 Lutheran World Federation member churches across 94 countries, more than 200 grants provided for evangelism and leadership to those partners. 11 new global ministry and evangelism projects. 230 missionaries, including 93 young adults and global mission volunteers in more than 40 countries. Amparo, accompanying migrant minors for protection, advocacy, representation, and opportunities. 41,435 unaccompanied children entered the U.S. 75,622 families with one parent and one or more children entered in the southwestern U.S. alone. 76 welcoming and sanctuary congregations across 26 synods, 5 sanctuary synods. Advocacy. 34,255 messages were sent to Congress and the administration through the ELCA Advocacy Action Center. More than 30,000 ELCA Advocacy Network members. 231 visits to members of Congress in Washington, D.C. Ecumenical and interreligious relations. Celebrating more than 50 years of dialogue with the Catholic Church in the U.S. Strengthening partnerships with the historic Black churches. Presiding Bishop Eaton was honored with the Interfaith Unity Award from the Islamic Society of North America Convention. A declaration of our interreligious commitment, a draft policy statement, was completed in preparation for public review through June 30th, 2018. Leadership. Presiding Bishop Elizabeth Eaton says, "It's not only the job of our seminaries and universities to identify and raise up leaders in the church. This is something that belongs to all of us." More than $4 million given to the ELCA Fund for Leaders. 251 seminary students receiving financial assistance during 2017 to 2018. 130 students receiving financial support from the International Leaders Program. The International Women Leaders Initiative provides scholarships for 19 young women from 10 global companion churches. These leaders are studying at 7 ELCA colleges and universities. ELCA in the news. The ELCA was featured across local, regional, national, and international media. National Public Radio, The Atlantic, BBC World News, NBC, Good Housekeeping, and many more. 500th anniversary of the Reformation. A year-long commemoration included With New Voices and Our Lutheran Life video series. Living Lutherans 500 Facts of the Reformation, ELCA500.org. Day-long event with ecumenical and interreligious partners in Washington, D.C. on October 31st, with hundreds in attendance and thousands watching live. 110 article placements in the media with more than 2 million impressions. We are church. We are Lutheran. We are church together. We are church for the sake of the world. Thank you. Learn more at elca.org.
Kind of a busy church, huh? Just think about what role that you all play in just the footprint that the ELC has across our country and across the world. So now I'm going to take a few more minutes and just share some thoughts with you through these slides. You all have read my bio, so you know that I'm a volunteer. I'm not in Chicago. I'm in Clearwater, Florida. I stay very actively connected to Chicago. Of course, I attend the church council meetings. There are 2 each year, April and November. I attend the Conference of Bishops meetings, which are March and October in those time frames. And so I am very much connected through the internet to the church-wide staff. And I really feel like even though geographically that I'm separated from the other officers, I feel like I have quite a presence through the internet, a virtual presence. That's the word I was looking for, virtual presence, and it's I think has worked out very well. Your congregations, your offering is stewarded by your congregation's council to support the work of your congregation. Your congregation designates a portion of your offering to be shared with the Synod and church-wide organization. These funds, we call those funds mission support, and I'm sure you're familiar with that term. Your congregation's mission support dollars are stewarded by your Synod to support their work, including nurturing congregations and rostered ministers, support local partners, and accompany the Synod's global companion churches. A percentage also gets shared with the church-wide organization. Mission support dollars are used to support congregations' response to local and worldwide ministry opportunities, engage in ecumenical and interfaith dialogue, and lead church-wide initiatives on behalf of the whole ELCA. And what you see are the 3 expressions. We talk about the 3 expressions. You know, we are very much, an interdependent church, and that's what this slide represents. Together, you all made it possible for your Synod to share $1,546,676 with the church-wide expression to support ministries. That represented 46.8% of the mission support that your congregation shared with the Synod. Thank you for your commitment to these, to increase your mission support to a similar amount in 2018. Please congratulate yourself for that. The mission support dollars that remain in your Synod support the vital work that your Synod does to enhance and sustain our ministry together, such as providing pastoral care to your rostered ministers and walking alongside congregations going through the call process. Your mission support dollars breathe life into your communities and congregations through the work of your Synod. So on behalf of all the ministries stewarded by the church-wide organization and your Synod, and all the people whose lives who are touched through these ministries, I want to say thank you. And I mentioned this to your vice president. We cannot say thank you enough for your generosity. And I just want you all to know that. Propelled by a commitment to Lutheran traditions and to being a community of faith that is always forming and being renewed, the ELCA's presiding bishop, church council, and conference of bishops initiated Call Forward Together in Christ's Strategic Directions 2025 for this church. Now, we have renamed it Future Directions, and that's what you see on the slide. The process sought to engage all ELCA members and partners in conversation about future directions so that this church can journey faithfully and effectively together in these years ahead. I can tell you from my experience in the Florida Bahamas Synod and my conversations with church leaders across our church, if there's one conversation that I found pretty constant, over my tenure as an ELCA member is where are we going? What is the strategic direction of this church? What is God asking us to do as a church? And this grassroots experience that we've had in producing Strategic Directions 2025, in my opinion, was one of the most effective. And attending churchwide assembly and our Synod assembly, seeing people roll up their sleeves and provide input and contributions to the conversation, I think has produced a strategic direction that I think has credibility across the church. The 5 goals that came out of this effort, and I'm going to just quickly walk you through them, I think reflects some of your yearnings and some of the things that you believe that this church ought to be doing. A thriving church, goal 1, a thriving church, spreading the gospel and deepening faith for all people. Number 2, a church equipping people for their baptismal vocations in the world and this church. An inviting church and welcoming church that reflects and embraces the diversity of our communities and the gifts and opportunities that diversity brings. Goal 4, a visible church deeply committed to working ecumenically and with other people of faith for justice, peace, and reconciliation in communities and around the world. And lastly, a well-governed, connected, and sustainable church. These are the goals, and as you might suspect, one might ask, well, how can we really approach and accomplish all of this at once? Well, that's, impossible. You can't eat all that banana at one time. So what has happened as a result of this effort is that our Conference of Bishops, Church Council, presiding bishop, have decided that we really have to establish the highest priorities, that we should go after those things first. And what has emerged out of that work and conversation are the 2 priorities that you see on the screen: congregational vitality and leadership. So over the next 3 years, that's where the major focus is going to be. And also you see that the organizations within our church that are committed to working together in a collaborative way, that's what their focus is going to be. So then the question becomes, well, what is congregational vitality? Our Conference of Bishops, I'm with them, as I said, twice a year when they attend their meetings. I would also like to say your Conference of Bishops really takes the time to really focus and talk deeply about the issues facing our church. The burden fell to them to define congregational vitality. The bishops are very familiar with what is happening out in the synods, of our church. And so that is the definition, the operating definition we're working with, as you see on the screen. Communities of Jesus that nurture life-changing relationships with God and one another. This church is working with more than 35 synods on intentional strategies for improving congregational vitality. In addition, the unit has partnered with synods to start 124 new congregations and communities of Jesus over the past 2 years. The directors for evangelical mission continue to engage synodical leaders, structures, and strategies, and coordinate and staff the education of all evangelical mission support, and stewardship ministries in each synod. We want to lift up some of the new starts in your synod: Ecclesia in Omaha, Lakota Lutheran Center and Chapel in Scotts Bluff. And I looked at a map, so I know where these are, just so you know. Now Lutheran Chapel in Omaha, Spirit of Grace Lutheran Church in Holdridge, Sudanese Lutheran Fellowship in Omaha, Sudanese Messiah Worshiping Communities in Omaha, United Asian Evangelical Lutheran Ministry in Omaha. Now, this is the information that I was provided, and I think we ought to lift that up. Huh? Why don't we do that? I've had the privilege of meeting your directors of evangelical mission, Rebecca and Richard Sheridan. I assume they're in here somewhere, but there they are over there. So I want to lift them up. We really appreciate their work and what they're doing. So as I move on and talk about the other strategic priority is leadership. There has been a lot of discussion about the leadership needs of our church. When you listen carefully to what our leaders say at the congregational, synod, and church-wide areas of our church, you hear a very clear message. Not only should we focus on the professional development needs of our rostered ministers, but we should equally focus on the needs of our lay leaders as well. In both areas, we should do more to prepare our leaders to serve the community of Jesus in the context they are located. So one of the things you're going to see over the next 3 years is how are we going to better equip our leaders to do what we're asking them to do. In November 2016, Bishop Edens launched an initiative to inspire leaders within this church to seek out and encourage gifted people in their congregations, communities, and networks to consider a call to the ministry of the gospel, supported by growing levels of scholarship for seminary tuition. At that time, Bishop Eden announced an additional $3 million for the ELC Fund for Leaders, which will provide full tuition seminary scholarships for 60 additional students over the next 3 years. You have some Fund for Leaders scholarship recipients in your Synod, and I just want to lift their names up. Halcyon Bajorstad at Wartburg, Aaron Bronchard, LSTC, Courtney Geibert. Are these names familiar to you? Heather Gertz, Wartburg, Eric Hill, Luther, Carolyn Keenan, Luther, Sherry Schwedheim, Luther, Tim Stacy, Wartburg, and Heidi Youngquist in Wartburg. Let's give them a hand for those future leaders. We also want to thank you for your companion synod relationships with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Tanzania and the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Argentina and Uruguay. I told the pastor from Argentina, Uruguay, I said, you're a long way from home. The church receives the gifts of companions, and we are reformed in our U.S. context. This work is supported through approximately 24 local events offered to synods and congregations each year. The events are a venue for training and experiential learning that increase participants' understanding and build new capacities in the use of accompaniment as a narrative, lens, and method for global and local mission engagement. Thank you for sponsoring your long-term missionaries and your YAGMs. And what I have here is Christy Marasca and Ignacio Madrusen, Argentina, Uruguay, Reverend Deborah and Joseph Troster of Tanzania, Reverend Jenny and Colin Grangard in Jerusalem, West Bank, Reverend Thumba Makabala in West Africa, Megan Brown Saavedra in Mexico, Reverend Linda Johnson Senyuklo in Liberia, Dr. Stephen and Jody Swanson, Tanzania, and Reverend Wal Reed in South Sudan, and your YAGMs, Kristen Bartlett in Rwanda, and Jake Connolly in Southern Africa. Let's give them a hand. Now, some of you may not be familiar with this slide. Some of you will be familiar with this slide because last year we asked you to participate in Faith, Sexism, Justice. It was a study as we were journeying toward our social statement that will go before the social statement in Women and Justice that will be presented to the Churchwide Assembly in 2019. And we ask you to get that work done, submit comments and inputs by the 31st of August, because at that point, the church staff would then begin to prepare the draft social statement. And I hope that many of you participated in that. Well, now we're at a point where there is a draft social statement, and I think there was a group meeting yesterday upstairs hearing on this statement. And the reason why I have it here is that on this slide is that we really do want your input before September 30th, 2018. Another reason why I have it here is that I want us to do a better job of really participating in this process than we did with the social statement, human sexuality. How many of you remember that? You know, one of the assumptions that we made, knowing that that statement was going to be somewhat controversial, just the subject matter, the assumption was that congregations led by our pastors would engage in those conversations. What we discovered after the '09 vote was that many congregations did not go through those conversations, and many of our members were quite surprised at the decisions that were made. Let's not let this happen with the Women in Justice social statement. And so I am urging you, you know, there are some conversations that are hard to have. They're difficult. And this is going to be one of those conversations. How many of you have already or had any of these kinds of discussions? Raise your hands in your congregations. And so there are few hands raised. That's why I'm bringing this up. And I have to honestly tell you, I can give you examples based on my ethnicity and my racial background. I can talk about that all day and tell you what I've experienced over my 68 years. But when it comes to the issue of women in justice, I'm in a different group. I have benefited from being a male in our country, in our society. And so, in my perspective, I clearly can benefit from the Women in Justice social statement work to better understand what my responsibility is, you know, as a male in our society, as a member of our church, and I can share some of those perspectives that I've had in another context in this work that we're doing. So I'm asking you, this is the homework that I was talking about. Please go back to your churches, have those conversations. Not everybody's going to be happy, you know, because some of this is hard work, but God wants us to do it. And we need to produce the best social statement that we possibly can. It's a guide. It's a guide. It's to help us be better Christians in our world. It will help us better express what we believe. So we are in our 5th year of Always Being Made New, the campaign for the ELCA. We've received more than $175.5 million, $145 million in gifts and commitments, and $30.5 million in planned gifts to support and expand 10 ELCA ministries. ELCA World Hunger was the special campaign a couple of years ago, and is grateful to report that through that effort, we have that was now supporting projects in 60 countries, including the United States, working for a world in which all are fed. The campaign for the ELCA will focus on the global church sponsorship priorities of the campaign. Thank you for your gifts. Your gifts totaled $542,634 in 2017. Thank you very much. In World Hunger, we're grateful to report, as was stated earlier, that over $21.3 million was given in support of our church's ministry. We want to thank you for your contribution of $434,500. You had one ELCA domestic hunger grant of $2,500. It was funded in your Senate. Lutheran Family Services of Nebraska is one of these programs. Lutheran Family Services International Center of the Heartland addresses food insecurity needs of Omaha's refugee and immigrant population. New Americans remain integral and yet vulnerable as they seek out work and connections in a new community. With our support, Lutheran Family Services provides culturally appropriate, familiar food for families learning to call a new place home. In the area of disaster response, we want to thank you for your Synod for over $397,000 in contributions. The ELCA Interreligious Task Force, which was appointed by Presiding Bishop Eaton in 2016, has prepared a draft interreligious policy statement to be considered by the 2019 ELCA Churchwide Assembly. This draft of a declaration of our interreligious commitment is an invitation to everyone in the ELCA to comment. And the comment period closes in June 30th of 2018. This is another area of homework. Please go to this link, read the statement. We live in an interfaith world, don't we? We have it in our communities, we have it in our work centers, we have it in our schools. We don't live among ourselves. We live among others who have different faith traditions and identities, and yet we are expected to live out our faith as Lutheran Christians in everything that we do. And we know that that's difficult, isn't it? In 1991, we had a statement that was approved by the Churchwide Assembly committing us to providing policies and some direction to our ELCA members on how to live out our witness. And we haven't done that. So this statement, and I'm on the task force, this statement will provide ideas on and commitments on how should we go about doing this. When we had the Pulse nightclub massacre, how many of you are familiar with that? In Florida, in Orlando. My pastor organized a memorial service in Clearwater. And quite frankly, that's hardly ever done. But the interfaith community showed up. And we paid our respects to the tragedy that occurred 150 miles away from us. None of the other faith communities decided to take that on. This is what it means to be Lutheran. This is why I love this church. We're not always comfortable in how we interact in this interfaith world, but we have the courage. We demonstrate the courage to take risk. Am I right? And we need to be proud of that, because I tell you, communities look forward to us. In talking to some of the military chaplains, ELCA chaplains in our military are often relied upon to help military units address issues that deal with LGBTQIA. Those soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardmen that have challenges, as they try to do their work and address the kind of challenges that they have within the military uniform. Who do they go to? They go to Lutheran chaplains. Why? Because the other chaplains believe that the Lutheran chaplains are better equipped to deal with it. It is what it is. It is what it is. And that's not me saying it, that's the chaplains sharing that with me. So this is just an example of why I'm excited about serving you, serving our church in what we do. Every morning I get up and look in the mirror, I like what I see. And the reason why I like what I see is because of people like you and because of our church. I want to thank you for your support of this church, your generosity, your friendliness, all the things that you do to make the ELCA what it is today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Don't go anywhere just yet. You are our guest, and we have a tradition here of just really impressing our guests. So much so you'll hear them respond to it. I'm going to get over on this side. What did we do now? Break it? Oh, we're fine. Okay, that's good. It's always good to know. We want to present you with this thank you gift on behalf of all of us with some nice Nebraska treats here. This, for example, there's this lovely Nebraska Synod t-shirt.
I love it. I love that red. I love that red.
See? And then you like to snack.
Yes.
I've been with you at council meetings, so there's some Nebraska popcorn.
All right.
And a whole lot of other goodies in there, but you're a chicken guy. I'm sorry. You can order it, but this is some good Nebraska beef.
I had it last night. Yes.
So, with our thanks, please share that with Loretta.
I will.
She's a lovely woman. And I want to call forward a couple of our deacons here while you're standing here, because you've been a great supporter of that ministry, the roster of Word and Sacrament. I want to call deacons Francis Hall and Ann Hall forward. They have just a brief word to share with you before you go on your way. Come on over.
On behalf of the 28 deacons of Nebraska Synod, we want to thank you and churchwide for the support that you've given our new roster. And we have been meeting this past year to try to raise awareness of who and what we are. And so often, we thought the best way to do that is to present you with a t-shirt. And that you are now an honorary deacon.
I'll wear it.
As the tape reflects, we're from many different backgrounds and building on other foundations, and we want to thank you for the help in that. And we will be around tomorrow wearing that shirt so you can ask us questions.
All righty.
Thank you
so much. Thank you.
Hold that up, Bill, so they can. This is, I don't know if they can zoom in. This is a Nebraska Synod Deacon exclusive. It says, it reads, "Deacons, the duct tape that holds the church together." Those are your deacons. So, honorary Deacon Horn, thank you very much for your presentation and for being with us throughout. We'll look forward to the rest of the time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And at this time, I want to call forward one of our keynote speakers, the Reverend Dr. Chris Alexander. Chris, come on forward. While she's making her way forward, I want to share a few words about Chris. Chris has been wonderfully flexible because she knows the schedule might shuffle a little bit. Pastor Chris is a member of the staff at Countryside Community Church in Omaha, which is a congregation of the United Church of Christ, a full communion partner. You may also recognize the name because Countryside is the Christian presence at the Tri-Faith Initiative in Omaha. And you know a lot. That's the only place in the world that's happening with Christian, Muslim, and Jewish worship centers on the same site. We've been eager to see that unfold. We've been great supporters of that. But I'm tickled because I've gotten to know Chris and just enjoyed talking with her. She's also an ELCA pastor on the roster of the Nebraska Synod. So we're excited at the work she does and are looking forward to her sharing with us some of her experience and wisdom she's gained as she's gone through the discernment and decision-making at Countryside and so many other places. So, Chris, I'm just going to give you your gift now. I'm still counting on you to speak.
Since I'm from Nebraska, if I got swag or not.
You do get swag.
Oh, good.
Now, it's the same swag.
It's okay.
So you have to wear it when you go out of state.
Okay.
But yes, there too with you are Nebraska goodies and T-shirt and some other things. So thank you for being with us.
Okay.
Welcome. They are yours.
Thank you. Thanks. I am one of you, which is kind of fun. Because I work at a United Church of Christ congregation, often people associate me as being a pastor of the UCC as well, which I am. I'm actually dual rostered between the Lutherans and the UCC. But I was born and raised a Lutheran. I went to a Lutheran college. I went to 4 out of the 8, now 7 ELCA seminaries. My doctorate comes from Luther Seminary. I just graduated last year with Sarah Cordray with our Doctor of Ministry. I am Lutheran to the core. So when I am part of the Tri-Faith Initiative here in Nebraska, in Omaha, I represent all of you. And many of you were a part of that Tri-Faith Initiative even before I was a part of it through Countryside. And so my first conversations about the Tri-Faith were all, Bishop Moss was there with us. In fact, that was my first introduction to you, actually, was to talk about the Tri-Faith. So it's really amazing how far we've come since 2013 when we first had those conversations. And I want you all to know that even though Countryside is, in fact, the primary Christian presence of the Tri-Faith, we are not the only Christian presence of the Tri-Faith. All of you are part of it as well. All Christians across the world are a part of this. And so we need, as Countryside, to be able to represent all of you and to open up our conversations in an ecumenical way to talk about what that means, because Christians are not all the same, right? In fact, in my experience, it's easier to talk with the Jews and the Muslims than it is some of my Christian friends. So that is something that we're working on, and myself, that's one of my charges in this work, is to open up that ecumenical conversation. So I hope all of you know that as I'm there, you're there, and I'd like to invite you to come be present with us, whether you live in Omaha or throughout the state. I'd like you to come visit us at some point and walk our gardens and pray for us and just be there with us, so that you know that that ministry is also your ministry, not just ours. So thanks for getting that started so that I could have some place to land, because it's been an incredible journey. Now, I have a whole bunch of slides, and we ran a little bit over, so I'm just going to go through them kind of quickly. But I want to connect with this theme that we have for our assembly, this idea of building on the foundations of Christ. Paul says, "For we are God's servants working together. You are God's field, God's building. According to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I lay a foundation, and someone else is building on it. Each builder must choose with care how to build on it. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one that has been laid, the foundation of Jesus Christ." Paul tells us that we build on that which has already been provided for us by God, and that foundation is Jesus the Christ, and that we are to choose with care how we are to build on that foundation. So we're not creating something out of nothing. We're literally creating together with God in what God is already doing in the world. Now, when we do that, we often think about that foundation and the work that we do in the ministry that we do in a very concrete way. We think of things, in fact, Paul even points to it a bit, that we are God's building. We think of things like buildings and programs and institutions and council meetings and those kinds of things, right? But I would say and venture and challenge you all to think about, when you look at Jesus' ministry, you're not seeing concrete things. Jesus didn't have a building, right? There was no Sunday school. There were no strategic planning retreats. There were none of those things. The initial creative sense of Jesus' ministry was an energy, an activity of God that was already present with us in the world. They were things like storytelling, like having conversations with one another, for prayer, and for building relationships and connecting with one another. That's the foundation of Jesus' ministry that we build on. And that's the stuff that Countryside has spent a great deal of time working with in the area of discernment and spiritual practices. And a lot of that is wrapped up and kind of came to a focus point with this whole decision and discernment about being part of the Tri-Faith Initiative in Omaha. Many of you already know about the Tri-Faith, but I'll tell you more about it as we go. But it is this sense of identity and energy that I'd like you, and I think Paul is calling us all to be about being very intentional about, to participate with what Jesus and God have already begun for us in the world so that we can continue to build on it. And that we do that by choosing with care how we participate, and that means listening for God. So what is exactly the foundation that we're building on? In Matthew 22, a Pharisee asks, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He says to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." This is the foundation that we're building from. There's nothing about church buildings in there. There's nothing about Sunday schools. It's about relationships and loving one another. So how many commandments are there in this? How many do you see? 2, right? There's actually 3. You have the love of God, you have the love of neighbor, and you have the love of self. Self is the one that usually gets forgotten. You are to love your neighbor as you love yourself. If loving yourself is not something you do well, please do not love me the way you love yourself. 2 out of 3 is not good enough in this. You have to look for all 3. So we have 3 great loves that we're working with. And at Countryside, we build on that foundation of those 3 great loves through what we call the Phoenix Affirmations. It was a book that was written in 2006 by our senior pastor, Eric Elnes. He got a group of clergy and lay people together in Phoenix to talk about those kinds of things that we can talk about our Christianity that brings us joy. How do we express who we are as Christians in a very joyful way instead of saying, well, I'm a Christian, but I don't believe this, or I'm a Christian, but I don't do this, or because we were getting a lot of negative press there. And we still are in a lot of ways. So when we think about what it is that brings us joy, we have all kinds of things to talk about. And these 12 affirmations that are part of the Phoenix Affirmations are the ways that Countryside actually helps to articulate what we do and how we build on these 3 great loves. We concentrate and lift up our commitments to the environmental stewardship, to social justice, to artistic expression, as well as an openness to other faiths. We also use these to uplift many overlooked values like the value of recreation and play and prayer, how we take care of ourselves. And these affirmations are biblically based, even in their assertion that the Bible be taken seriously and authoritatively, but not literally. So these are the ways that Countryside has begun to build on these foundations that Jesus began with us, these 3 great loves. And that's how we chose to do that, because we chose with care, as Paul asks us to do, how to do that. But how you, as a congregation, decide to move outward from the grace that is the basis of this foundation into the world is going to be up to you. The only requirement, really, in the whole process is that you include God in the conversation, and that's discernment. One of the things I found in my research for my doctoral program was that the key to a lot of this is the intentionality of it all. And when you choose with care, as Paul has asked us to do in our text, you are being intentional about your dissertation, about your decision making, about how you go about listening intentionally for God and what God is already doing in the world and how you might be called to participate with that. So that is what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about choosing with care, being led through the pillars of smoke and the pillars of fire by God in the world. That all of our conversation together that helps us build on the foundations of what God is already doing in the world comes with an intentionality and an intentional listening for what God has to say to us, what our communities have to say to us, and how we ourselves feel about how we're called by God to participate in the world. So, how did Countryside become part of the Tri-Faith? That is a major point of discernment for us, and I think it's a great example of how one congregation did a really good job, I think, of intentionally listening for God. We took a year and a half to discern whether or not we should participate as the Christian presence in the Tri-Faith Initiative in Omaha. For those of you who don't know exactly what the Tri-Faith is, it is an intentional co-location of a mosque, a synagogue, and a church together on a 35-acre campus. And we just recently kicked off a brand new launch for membership into the Tri-Faith, and we created a video that is a part of that tells you a little bit more about who we are as the Tri-Faith. So I'll play that for you now, so you get an update of where we are and what we're doing. 3 faith communities in Omaha, Nebraska took a shot at trying to be friends with one another.
To learn how to find mutual respect with people who are similar to us and people who are different.
To do something that is outrageous.
Tri-Faith.
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 Tri-Faith is the opportunity to change the landscape of religious life in the 21st century.
A new model.
The Tri-Faith is courage.
That becomes the new norm.
Tri-Faith is the change that you want to see in the world.
The response of a call for the 3 children of Abraham to come back together.
An effort to consciously co-locate.
A great satisfaction.
An amazing project in Omaha, Nebraska.
With anxiety.
Tri-Faith for me is just the sensible thing to do.
It's the attempt to bring religious groups together that have traditionally had enmity for one another.
A slice of the kind of world that I would like to live in.
September 11th, Rabbi Aryeh Azriel formed a circle around the mosque in the area to form a protective barrier. We realized that we shouldn't just come together in moments of hardship or trauma or sorrow. We should come together in everyday moments. We should be part of one another's lives in a really profound way. And the only way to really do that is to co-locate.
Bringing Temple Israel, the American Muslim Institute, and Countryside Community Church here to a common campus.
3 communities who believe very different things. We worship the same God, but in 3 very different expressions, who historically have said because of those differences, we can't get along.
It's 3 faiths coming together, not to blend faiths or to dilute who we are as individual faith communities.
To show that these 3 faiths have more things in common than they have differences.
To me, the most important issue is not in changing anyone's mind, but simply in opening ours.
There will be no proselytizing. Everyone will be practicing his and her own beautiful faith.
Everyone who has chosen to spend some time working together on this, getting to know people of the other faith, has come away a better person for it, more grounded in their own faith.
I'm a better Muslim today. I'm a better human being. I'm a better leader.
One of the things that I've gained most by being involved in Tri-Faith for 10 years is a truer sense of who I am as a Jew.
The idea is for people who are Jewish, people who are Christian, people who are Muslim will worship on this property and get to know one another as neighbors would get to know one another. And we would hope that those kinds of relationships then would foster peace.
The physical nature of Tri-Faith is a 35-acre plot of land. There are 4 buildings that are on the property, 1 for each of the faith communities, and then 1 for the Tri-Faith community itself that is envisioned as a welcome center.
And for those that may be hesitant to go to a mosque or go to a synagogue or go to a church, start at the Tri-Faith building. I'd like it to be a place where people come to learn.
The central iconic portion of the Commons will be the bridge. Just like in your own neighborhood where you have streets and walkways that connect one another, the bridge will be that connecting point.
I would love to see one day that another Tri-Faith campus pops up in Europe, in the Middle East, in South Asia, and doesn't matter where. But what's more important than that is to see people come together.
When we make statements like, well, in polite company, you shouldn't talk about religion or politics, I think what we're saying is then we can't have the rich relationships that are real.
Diversity is not a problem here, it's an actual goal.
And all of us in our scriptures, in our holy writings, have difficult texts. This is where I would like to start the conversation.
It's not an issue that we have disagreements. How do we work together to work through those disagreements?
We're going to set a model and live by example in a way that our children will just say, oh yeah, well, why would you ever be separated?
Look at me, I'm smiling finally.
I'm happy too.
Who are the Muslim folks? Who are the Jewish folks? Well, they're our neighbors.
Being involved with Tri-Faith feels really revolutionary, but I hope it's not. I hope it's normal, because getting along with other people is natural and normal.
My heart is so full being the mother of a young black girl in America. Oh, like I can't even put any more words to it, but this is so representative of just that, just respectful, accepting friendship.
I'm Roman Catholic. I grew up Catholic, but I married a Muslim, so my kids are Muslim, and they're afraid to tell people they're Muslim.
We're exposing Gideon to people of the Islamic and the Christian faith very early, and I think our main hope is for him to meet people and create lifelong friends.
This initiative is going to bring that kind of a value to us, to our kids, so they can grow up to be a good human being, not just good Christian Jews or Muslims.
It meant the world to me that my friends were there at my son's bar mitzvah, and of all different faiths were there. That really did mean a lot to me, guys.
I was always leery to become light to the world. I want us to become first candle to Omaha.
People are getting to know each other and building respect and occasionally even trust. And if we can have dozens and hundreds and eventually thousands of those relationships, that to me would be the biggest success.
When we get too discouraged about can these faiths ever find peace, that you realize, well, shoot, they're finding peace in Omaha, Nebraska. Maybe there's hope for us wherever we are.
Blessed be the peacemakers, and may God bless all the efforts advancing this caravan of peace.
Yay. See what you guys started? Isn't that amazing? It's been a joy to be a part of this ministry. We have now 2 buildings complete on the campus. By the way, the campus is in Omaha. It's on the corner of 132nd and Pacific. It's literally 6 minutes down the street from where my current congregation already is, and we're going to pack up and move down the street. But the Temple Israel was the very first building on the campus. They were there in 2012, 2013. And then last year in July, the American Muslim Institute did a grand opening for their building. And Countryside broke ground last year, right about this time. And we're due to be in our building by spring of next year. We have completed this much. In fact, I've been in Spain for the last 3 weeks, and I just took a tour yesterday again to see, and it's amazing the work that they have done in the 3 weeks since I've been gone. The parking lot has been poured now, and all the framework is all enclosed, and they're already starting to frame in some of the stuff and ask where the electrical outlets really need to be, because, you know, you plan them on the plan, but then when you get there, you think, well, why did we want that there? What were we thinking? So it's coming along really nicely, and the ring road around is finished now too. So this is a map of what the campus looks like. You can see Temple Israel is there, AMI, and then Countryside Community Church, and there's a road that goes all the way around. It's called Faith Plaza, and we call that the Ring Road. And then we have a fourth building called the Tri-Faith Building, which is designed to be an educational building and a welcome center for people. As you heard on the video, we're hoping that anybody that feels kind of uncomfortable in any one of the faith traditions could maybe start at the Tri-Faith and understand what it is that we're trying to do in opening conversations. And that conversation includes not only people of faith, but people without faith, people who are just coming into the conversation for the first time from none of the faith traditions. So that fourth building is a very important welcome center, as well as opening that conversation to a wider group of people. If you'll notice down the center, there's some water there. Those are protected wetlands. There's a creek that runs through the middle of the property. This property used to be a Jewish golf course, ironically, because Jews weren't allowed to join the other golf courses or the golf places in Omaha, so they had their very own. And the creek that ran through there is, because it's protected waterways, it is under the direction of the Corps of, how's that work? Yeah, right, those people. And so the civil engineers. And the creek that runs through there, we didn't name. It had a name at the very beginning, even when that golf course was done. Anybody know what the name of that creek is? It's called Hell Creek. It is. And we can't change the name even if we wanted to, because we don't have control over it. But ironically, we have to literally bridge Hell Creek to make the Tri-Faith work. So, yeah. So we have a circular bridge that connects all four of the buildings together, and it bridges it in two different places, and it's an amazing, iconic bridge. This is what we call our fifth building, which is the master plan for the landscaping that goes with all of this. And in this, we have provided a ton of pathways, walkways, prayer labyrinths, all kinds of outdoor playground, natural playground equipment for kids to play on. We have a mall area in which to do like picnics and concerts and all that kind of stuff. We have 2 amphitheaters. We have all kinds of stuff that's planned in this, all along with the wetlands area that's protected there. And that's due to be completed by the end of this year even. So those walkways will be available for you. And I would like to invite all of you, whether you live in Omaha or wherever you live in Nebraska, to please at some point or another come visit the campus and get to know what it is. Walk the pathways. We're going to have places along the way on the pathway that you can stop and do some spiritual practices, some prayers from all 3 of the faith traditions. We are not trying to blend our religions or our faiths together. Each of us have our unique worship spaces. We are going to be more fully Christian in conversation in the Tri-Faith than we were without it, because when people ask us what's unique about being Christian in the Tri-Faith, we have to have answers for that. So we actually get better at being Christian than without being part of the Tri-Faith, and that's true for all 3 of our faiths. So by learning more about the other faiths, we learn more about our own, and we become deeper involved in our conversation with God by being deeper involved in our conversations with our neighbors. And that's something we want to extend to all of you to be a part of, and that's what those walkways are there for. So I hope you'll come walk those walkways and pray for the Tri-Faith ministry. Now, this is the bridge that's going to be lit up at night. It's going to be way cool, right? So you can even walk it at night and be fun. So that's the physical nature of the tri-faith itself. But I think the tri-faith is an example of how a congregation, a community, can be listening to God and figuring out what God is calling your congregation or your community to participate in the world. Not everybody will have a tri-faith that they're a part of, but everybody has a calling from God to participate in life, in the abundance of life. So how do you as a community, as a congregation, listen to what God might be calling you to be about? And that's what we did when we were offered the invitation to be a part of the Tri-Faith Initiative. We took a year and a half to discern, to intentionally listen to God. So why would a congregation who has an already paid for building that is in front of Westside High School, it's a wonderful location in Omaha. It's paid for, it's in really good condition. We have a great community. We're in the center of a neighborhood that we've been a part of helping to build for years. Why would we consider selling the place, uprooting everything we've always known, changing from one neighborhood to the next, having to raise several $1 million for that privilege to be able to do that, and to risk all the fallout that may come from this, because this was not an easy decision for us. We lost about 100 families in this conversation. We risked alienating people. We risked breaking up families and friendships that have been long-standing in our community. So why would a congregation do such a thing? And the answer is because the Spirit's calling us. We have been called to literally stand with our brothers and sisters of the Jewish and the Muslim faith, and that's why we did it. Not because we needed more space, not because we needed a parking lot, not because the youth were complaining about being in our basement, because they're going to be in the basement in the new church too. It's just a nicer basement. But it's an amazing thing when you move and change your congregation and change the kind of focus of your ministry when you know that you're following where the Spirit is leading. And the only way that you'll know that is by intentionally listening to God and to the communities around you is about what God is already doing in the world and what your call in that is about. So that's the discernment we did. And we did the discernment at Countryside in two different levels. We did the phase one. We started with that initial invitation to be a part of the Tri-Faith from the Episcopal Diocese, who was the original Christian partner of the Tri-Faith, and then asked for a partnership from the ELCA. The Nebraska Synod here was a part of that. And then we got involved in the congregation, or in the conversation. We created a whole bunch of specific teams to do some research. We did a dream team to talk about what our ministries are and how they could be enhanced by being a part of the Tri-Faith, or whether that would actually change our ministries in a way we didn't really want to change. We had a research team to try to figure out how we would be in partnership with the Episcopal Church and the Lutheran Church as a UCC congregation. Those conversations took a long time to have, and what we found is that the Episcopal Diocese had a much more closed polity than we do as a UCC congregation, and it was a lot easier for the UCC congregation to be the primary presence of the Tri-Faith and invite the Episcopals back in to help us and partner with us than it was for the Episcopals to be the primary and invite us in, because there is no full communion understanding between the Episcopals and the UCC. There is with the Lutherans and the Episcopals. So I got to do communion, but my senior pastor couldn't. So, those are the kind of rules that we're dealing with, right? So the UCC, with its open polity, has the opportunity to be able to invite all kinds of Christians in to be a part of the conversation. There are no restrictive polity rules about that. So we found all those things out by being in discernment with one another, by having those conversations with one another. We had a congregational vote at the very beginning to determine whether we were going to even really consider this invitation. And then if we were to consider it, what would be the process that we would take to do that? And we had that congregational meeting, and we agreed to go ahead and consider it, and that we would do a 40 days of discernment. And so we set up a ton of workshops, lectures, films, panel discussions. We'd open the chapel for prayer and meditation every day. We had classes on Judaism and Islam. We had so much conversation wrapped around this idea. The only thing that we refused to talk about in those 40 days of discernment was money. You couldn't talk about money during those 40 days. It didn't matter how much it cost. If you didn't feel like you were called by God to be a part of this interfaith ministry, then money didn't matter. You had to determine whether or not Countryside Community Church was called by God to work in interfaith ministry in this way. And once we determined that, then we would have a second phase about what it would cost and what the resources would take to do that. How many of you have ever had a church discussion where the very first question was not, how much is it going to cost us? This is how you get around that. You refuse to talk about money. Do discernment in two different places. One, what's God doing in the world and how are we called to participate in that? And then, if this is our calling, what are the resources that it takes to do that? We had a congregational vote 40 days after the initial congregational meeting, and we did vote, in fact, with 70% to go ahead to the second phase of discernment, which was to choose an architect and do a visioning process. We did an assessment about what our building was worth and how many resources we had to go forward in this calling. We did a whole bunch of conversation with our Jews and Muslim brothers and sisters to come in and tell us more about what they did and how they felt called to be where they were doing and what it cost them, and how they dealt with people in their congregation that weren't necessarily together with them. One of the workshops we had was the benefits of staying and the benefits of going, so that each of the folks that were both for it and against it for lots of different reasons had a chance to say why they thought it was a good idea or a bad idea. We had ongoing conversations, and then finally in April of 2015, we had a congregational vote to decide whether or not we were going to take the step to relocate, sell our building and relocate to a different location and start a capital appeal and run a budget and do all those things. And so it took us quite a long time. But I think the key to this was the conversation that we had with one another. We did, in fact, vote to be a part of this, and we had to then take step forwards about what does that mean. So then we had to build all these other committees and all these other things that would take us into the next stage of conversation, which is what color should the carpet be, right? So we're still fighting about that one. We haven't quite decided that. In fact, we might just go with wood. Then we won't have to worry about it. But the key to this whole thing was that intentionality and the spiritual practices that led up to it. I don't think we could have even had this conversation if our congregation had not already been steeped in the idea of spiritual practices, of listening for God, of prayer and meditation. And when we think of spiritual practices, that's what we think of, right? Prayer, meditation, worship with one another. But I would suggest that what made our discernment so spectacular and such a great learning curve for all of us was that spiritual practices are anything that you do intentionally to open up a conversation with one another and with God and bring all those voices together and let the Spirit move as it does in the midst of that congregation. So prayer is, spiritual practice is more than prayer. It's about conversation. And it's about opening yourself up to the community and let the community tell you what they're about and what they're doing. For you to go out and for you to tell your story to the community about what you feel called to be about. And the proper use of media. Media can be such a resource. It can also be a hindrance. So again, like Paul warned us, we have to choose with care how we use stuff, how we choose to build on those foundations. But media is very much a spiritual practice and can be used that way. So when we did the different kinds of spiritual things, we did worship and sacraments. We did the examen, which is a particular kind of prayer during worship. We did centenary prayer, intercessory prayers, prayer walks, prayer labyrinths, personal meditations, all those things that you think of when you think of spiritual practices. But we also did public lectures. We also had panel discussions. We had people come in and tell us what brought them joy about their own faith. We had classes on Muslim 101, for instance. We also had small group discussions. We had a whole bunch of Bible studies about what it means to be, what it means to have one God in many different expressions. The pluralism in our world today, what does that mean? We did a lot of discussion around John 4:16, which talks about the only way to God is through me, right? Through Jesus. So we had lots of conversations about what that really means, to be an interfaith conversation. And you can't do that by yourself. You have to do that in the midst of a community. So conversation is key to this. We had dinner discussions and classes. And one of the things that I think is so great about the UCC polity that maybe we Lutherans can learn from is that when we have congregational votes or congregational meetings, you can't have absentee ballots and you can't have proxies. You have to literally be in the room to vote. And the reason why they believe that and why they hold true to that is because they believe the Spirit is in the room with you. And that through the conversation of that congregational meeting, you could be moved to change your mind. And so proxies and absentee ballots don't make any sense. And that is the very heart of what spiritual practice is helping us to do. And when I did my research for my doctoral work on this, what I found is that if you're engaging in spiritual practices, you're much more likely to attend a congregational meeting. How many of you have congregational meetings with just barely the quorum that shows up? Spiritual practices could be a way to help feed into that participation, because the greater your spiritual practice participation is, the greater your participation is in decision making in your congregation, because it means something to them. They're actually listening to what's going on in the world and how they should participate in it. It's not just trying to figure out the best way to attract people from the outside into your congregation, but rather, what are you doing to participate with what God is doing in your neighborhoods? And that is a whole different discussion. UCC does that well. Community practices means that you're open to the conversation that's happening outside of your doors as well as inside of your doors. Find out what's going on in the neighborhoods around you. Find out what they care about, what they're concerned about. We did a whole bunch of stuff. We do a food pantry. We have tri-faith picnics. We have interfaith Thanksgiving services. We set up neighbor-to-neighbor dinners where we had 2 Jews, 2 Muslims, and 2 Christians go out to dinner with one another over a series of 6 months, and had them just talk to one another and get to know one another. We participate in the Pride Fest. We do Seder meals. We went to the Eid services in the Islamic community. We have a group of youth who are part of the Tri-Faith Youth. We have a group of youth that were sent to be part of the Tri-Faith Kids programming and just get to know how that works. So just paying attention to the community around you and what they have to say to how you are living in that community is an important part of that conversation as well. And then media practices. I don't know what we would have done if we didn't have our website as a landing space for all the videos that we created. Every time we had a workshop or a panel discussion or a lecture, we filmed it. And then we kept it on our websites and on YouTube channels so that people could go back, even if they weren't able to be there that night, to participate in what was happening and hear that discussion. We had forums online. We had online chats. We had movies and community documentaries about different things. It was a fabulous discussion. We had what we called One Tree sessions, where the clergy and the leadership of all three faith traditions came together and talked about what brought them joy about their particular faith tradition and how Jesus fits into all three, or how sin or grace or salvation or eternal life, those kind of big questions about things. How do the three different faith traditions talk about those things? Those are community engagements, and we filmed all those things so people could be a part of it even if they couldn't actually attend it. Media practices can be very helpful. So spiritual practices are a wide array of things, and it's the reason why discernment is a great way to intentionally listen to God. Spiritual practices are something you can do. You can literally be intentional about prayer, about community conversation, about small group discussions, about bringing people together to connect with one another in ways that they wouldn't necessarily do on their own. So intentionally listening to God, neighbor, and self. Discernment builds community, which then in turn, community helps rebuild those discernment practices. So spiritual practices are the reason why Countryside opened themselves up to hear what God was doing and to do the absolutely impossible by raising several $1 million to move 6 minutes down the same street. It's an amazing ministry. It's one that I'm very proud of, and I want you all to be able to participate in it with us. Ways that you can participate is we just recently hired an executive director for the Tri-Faith Initiative itself, that fourth building that's going to be on campus, and we launched a capital appeal for that fourth building. We also just recently launched a membership drive to the Tri-Faith. So you don't have to be a member of any one of the three faith communities in order to be a member of the Tri-Faith. It's like joining the zoo or the children's museum or something like that. You can literally become a member of the Tri-Faith without being a member of the thing. So all of our international folks that love what we're doing and want to support us, they're members of the Tri-Faith now. You can all do that. There is a donation fee-based kind of thing, but it's whatever level of support you'd like to do, or if you just want to be a part of the membership, you can do that. So if you go to trifaith.org, you can be a part of that. There are lots of other ways that you can physically be on campus with us, whether you live in Omaha or whether you live anywhere in the Nebraska area. You're welcome to come be a part of this at any time. I would love someday to be sitting out on a picnic bench and watch you guys all walking around in the prayer places praying for the Tri-Faith. That would be an amazing sight for me. So, and come visit me anytime. I'd love to give you a tour of the place. So praying for the Tri-Faith is one way you can participate. You can participate in worship services. We have a chapel that we're building at Countryside that is 150 seats, about 150 people, and we imagine that as being an ecumenical chapel. So we can lead Lutheran services there. We can lead Episcopal services. We can have all kinds of Christian faith traditions come in and do worship. If that's something that you'd like to do or be a part of or help us plan some events, I'd love to hear your ideas for that. You can attend Tri-Faith events like the annual picnics that we have every August. August 12th this year is our annual Tri-Faith picnic. And we do a taste of Tri-Faith in January every year. You can be a part of that. You can attend all the lectures that we do. Center for Faith Studies is a ministry that I direct at Countryside, and we bring 6 to 8 lectures every year. Many of them are directed to the interfaith conversation, but there's lots of other ones like not this September, but next September. This is a sneak preview, and you guys are the first ones to hear this. William Paul Young will be there. He wrote The Shack. Yeah. So yeah, put that on your calendar and plan to attend. There's all kinds of lectures that we do. The synagogue does their own lecture series. You can be a part of those. We have a speakers bureau, so we can come out and talk to you. We also give tours. We're training docents to come in and do tours. So if you have a group or a confirmation class or something that you'd like to walk through, we'd love to have you and host you. So you just call us and let us know when you're going to be in town, and we'll set it up. We have Bible studies that are offered by all three faith traditions. You're always welcome to be a part of those. We have a program committee that you can actually be a part of and join in the conversation about some of the events that we could have on site. We hope someday to be offering tours with the Tri-Faith community so we can see what else is happening in the world of interfaith all around the world. We have Tri-Faith Kids and Tri-Faith Youth that you can always send kids to. We hope to have a choir that's all three faith traditions. And then whatever else your needs are, or your ideas are, or your listening for God leads you to do in the area of Tri-Faith or anything that we can help you with, we'd love to have your ideas be a part of that. So even though it's not an ELCA church that is on the site of Tri-Faith, you do have an ELCA pastor there, and I am there to help organize that ecumenical conversation, and I really hope that you all will take seriously that this is your ministry as well as ours, and that you'll come be a part of it and participate in it with us. I thank you very much. I was trying to speed up so that I could get through all that in this amount of time. I have another hour tomorrow that I want to talk about more specifically how we do spiritual practices and how that works on a very large congregational scale instead of personal meditation stuff. So we do that lots of different ways at Countryside, and that's where I spend a lot of my time speaking on how do we get large congregations or large groups of people together to do communal discernment about where God is calling a whole community and not just individual people to particular positions. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow afternoon, and we'll have some group discussion on that as well. So I hope you'll stick around and be a part of that. But for now, just let's pray. Creator God, we open our hearts and our minds as we seek your presence in the world around us. We know that wherever two or three are gathered, you are in the midst of us, and your voice is continually calling us to be all that you have created us to be. Through our conversations with each other and with you, we discern your spirit moving in the world. And as each of us respond to our own unique conversations with you, we build the communities that continue to build on your activity in the world through Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you very much.
We will now take a break of approximately 25 minutes, reconvening here again at 3:20 this afternoon. Festival session number 1 will then move into business session number 2. During that session, the proposed 2018 Nebraska Synod budget will be introduced. A budget hearing webinar was held prior to the assembly. It was recorded, and a link to that webinar can be found on the assembly homepage on the Nebraska Synod website. Formal consideration of the budget will take place at business session number 3 tomorrow afternoon. Please note, if you have not yet registered, registration will be suspended at 3:20 this afternoon until the report of the first ballot for the bishop election is complete. You are now dismissed. You may return promptly here again at 3:20. Thank you.
I'm going to be announcing the results of the first ballot, so if you all could come in and be seated, then we'll be able to move forward. The people that are standing near the door, if you would come in or stay out or whatever your pleasure is. Yes, that would be helpful if we would close the doors. That way, we would send a very clear message to the people in the audience. All right. All right, I will begin. There has been an election. There were 586 ballots cast, 6 spoiled ballots, 1 ballot for Reverend Stephen Berkey, 1 ballot for Sherry Duminy, 21 ballots for Reverend William Schrader, 25 ballots for Inba Mbarasu, 55 ballots in support of Reverend Sarah Corjay and Reverend Brian Moss, 477 ballots. I now declare Brian Moss as re-elected Bishop of the Nebraska Synod. God bless. Thank you.
I think he wants a recount. please. Thank you. The smart aleck in me wants to comment that your judgment hasn't improved in 6 years. The deeper me wants to say thank you for the privilege of the last 6 years and for the promise of 6 more. There are days when this isn't always fun. You remember what happened to my predecessor. The day I was elected, my mom said, "I like your hair the color it is." But, yeah, and I still have hair, that's right. And it's not white. It is an honor and a privilege and a blessing, and nothing short of, to be able to serve with and among you and the congregations and ministries of which you are a part. And it's something that I'm able to do and glad to be able to do because of the support I have from this woman.
Yes?
And if you haven't done that for your pastor's spouse lately, you should. Because pastors' families carry more of the ministry of this church than anyone who's not been in a parsonage will ever recognize. Remember that, please. Is there anything you want to say?
I just want to tell them the rest of the story.
Moving right along. No, seriously, is it?
Well, I was really pleased to hear so many speakers, Bill Horn today and Ruth at the Willing Witness Luncheon. And I was aware, my ears were really propped up when Bill was telling us all of the calls of the bishop. And Bill, I don't remember all of them, but I know there were several ones. Okay, yeah, I can see that in him. Okay, yeah. But then the last one was like an eye-opener, because it said agitator. And that's why things have been like they have been, huh? And actually, I will say to you that these last 6 years have been amazingly wonderful and amazingly difficult. And I am so grateful to know about Katie and Martin Luther. We went on that trip. And I really like them because they were messy people. I mean, not physically messy, but just their lives were a little messy. They were real. And that gives me permission to own the fact that I am both saint-sinner. He is both saint-sinner. And these last 6 years have seen a lot of polarities. Woman, man, externalizer, internalizer, extrovert, introvert, and there are many others.
Right.
But I would say that as I recall on our trip to New Haven, Connecticut to go to seminary, in our old pickup with, what kind of walls?
Plywood walls.
Plywood walls, and a tarp on the top. Thank you, Dad, for getting that. I have just been thinking through our journey together as husband and wife and as family, couple, and ministry. There have been so many people along the way in congregations who have reached out, supported. So many family members, our parents, our children, whom, wow, if you want to see the face of God in someone, just look at your children. Nathan in California, Becca here, Nick, thank you. And the staff, oh, the staff. They, Diane, she knows. And I want to thank them. I would like to also thank you, because this is something people don't know, because much of what you present is public. Pastors, spouses, lay leaders, family members, there's a public part that God lifts us up and provides strength, wisdom, and just the Spirit to move us. And what a blessing to feel that. But there are also those private, difficult times when one begins to peel the layers because we want to stay in ministry a long time. We don't want to burn out. Our marriages want to stay together. We peel the layers of the onion. And this man has been peeling layers, and so have I. So I encourage all of you in leadership, in ministry, in congregations, to really search to see one another, to know one another with compassion, empathy, understanding. I appreciated our presenter today having those conflictual conversations, because that's hard, and that's one of the hardest things it's been. But it's also life-giving, and it's what we're called to as we discern the future of our congregations and directions that we're supposed to go. So I've talked a lot, but I don't ever get to talk, so I'm talking.
Keep it up, keep it up.
So what I want to leave you with is it's okay to be messy children of God. And Ruth said, sometimes we need help. I hope you're still here, Ruth. And I say, go get it. Become who you are meant to be. Peel the layers. Be committed to one another, to God. And I thank you for the opportunity to walk alongside him most days. And I don't know, I guess we're going to try some more. That's all we're going to do.
I did marry up. Thank you, Debbie. And thank you again to all of you. Please help me say a word of thanks again to Pastor Sarah and Pastor Bill and Pastor Inba for being willing to stand in front of you all and to take that risk and to be willing to stand. I know they were ready to serve if they were called, so thank you. And one more time, and I'll have a chance for this tomorrow, but please, in person, and if you would now help me say thank you to an outstanding Nebraska Synod staff without whom none of this would happen. Think of the time we gained on the agenda. This can't go to my head because I know you really just wanted to save time. All right, we do have some business to continue to conduct, and I want to call your attention back to that as we begin our business session anew. The next set of items are scheduled to be considered en bloc. That means we will take one vote to adopt all of them. As per our rules, 10 members of the Assembly may request to have an item removed for separate consideration. It just means one person has to ask that something be considered separately from all the en bloc, and if they get 9 people to second that motion, we'll take it and consider it separately. Otherwise, all the en bloc items are considered together. Are there any requests from the floor to remove any items from en bloc for separate consideration? I'll make sure there's nobody going to the microphone. Okay. Then we will proceed, and I would ask Synod Secretary Karen Malang to present the Synod Council en bloc items.
On behalf of the Synod Council, I move that en bloc items detailed on page 11 of the Bulletin of Reports be approved.
Because the motion comes from the Synod Council, no second is required. Pursuant to our Assembly rules, we will go directly to a vote on the motion because it is en bloc. So if you have your green and red cards ready. All of those you in favor of passing the en bloc items, please raise your green voting card. Thank you. And those opposed, the red voting card. Thank you. The motion passes. We have adopted the en bloc resolutions, which means now we skip several pages ahead in the script. Okay. We now continue with the report of the Treasurer, and so I would ask Nebraska Synod Treasurer Dan Freeland to come forward to present the Treasurer's report.
Good afternoon. I am the treasurer of the Synod, and I'm very proud to be a part of this organization. And you'll find my report on page 28 of the Bulletin of Reports. But at this time, I'd like to ask Pastor Bob Hayden to join me at on the stage here to cover some of the basics that we're going to be talking about with the budget. Bob and I have worked together for a couple of years now, and our relationship is certainly a partnership between the Finance Committee and with our Treasury function. So, Pastor.
Thank you, Dan. I might just suggest one thing. Perhaps we should have another vote and vote on the other moss, perhaps. I don't know. Sorry, boss. That was a dumb thing for me to do, wasn't it? Yeah. First thing I'd like to do is I'd like to thank you all for the funding that you send to the Nebraska Synod, and just think what we could do if we got more, it got back to a level of like 2009, 2010, that what this man could do with that money in the ministry, it could be done. I just want you to perhaps think about that. One other thing before we get real serious here, Pastor Tollefson talked about how much fun it was to be on the nomination committee. Oh, you haven't had fun until you've been on the budget committee, so. Okay, enough of that. The Budget and Finance Committee report begins on page 29 of the Bulletin Reports with a narrative explanation of the budget on pages 30 through 41 and the proposed 2019 line item budget on page 29. And with that, we have developed the proposed 2019 budget. We are introducing this proposal to you so that you may have time to look it over and have conversation amongst yourselves. The budget proposal will be formally offered by action by the Assembly during tomorrow afternoon's business session. Okay. There are 6 major considerations that were integral to the development of the proposed 2019 operating budget of the Nebraska Synod and were deliberated by the Budget and Finance Committee in the process. First item, the need to provide a balanced budget for the year. We have revenue and ministries of the Synod. Number 3, the need to consider the changing revenue sources and expectations as part of our operational budget. Number 4 consideration, the need to consider how best to fulfill our financial responsibilities in our partnership with ELCA churchwide. Number 5, the need to consider how best to support the operations of the various ministries of the Nebraska Synod, including the service arms and related organizations and other ministries. And number 6, the need to support our staff in their roles and to fairly compensate those individuals who are dedicated to the mission of the Synod. So with these important considerations in mind, we have developed the proposed 2019 operating budget of the Nebraska Synod for your consideration.
Thank you, Pastor. I think as we talk through today, you'll see that what we're looking at for 2019, and we are talking about the 2019 operating budget for the Synod. The period we're in right now is 2018. We already have a budget approved. It was approved last year at this time. There have been amendments made to that budget, knowing the realistic nature of some of our income sources as we go into 2018 and 2019. So you'll see when we talk about comparisons between 2019, the future, and what we're seeing for 2018. The 2018 is amended to be more responsive to what we're seeing at the moment. You see a lot of detail in the bulletin of reports. You'll see a narrative that describes the variances we're seeing between years. That's to kind of help you get an idea of what we're looking at as we move forward into 2019. Again, we're managing this year, 2018, based upon the amended budget, and we're looking at that as it moves into 2019. So you'll see a lot of detail in the bulletin of reports that's part of the report in the package that has been provided to you. We'll certainly entertain any questions you have later on, but as we move forward, one of the things we talk about is mission share. I think Bill talked about it being mission support. We in Nebraska call it a little bit different, mission share. What this is, for those of you who are not aware, is the monies that come from you as members of every church and from the churches through to the Synod to support not only the operations of the Synod, but to support the ministries of the Synod and looking at the greater good, as Bill talked about earlier, the fact that a lot of this money goes to support the activities that are carried on by Churchwide, carried on by the Synod, and various activities within both domains. As you can see, mission share revenue, from a graphical perspective, we're seeing a slight decline year by year in what we're seeing as far as mission share income. If you look at it, we had a very peak in 2009, and obviously after that, the mission shares tended to tail off. In the past couple of years, we've seen a kind of a positive from the standpoint of it. The downward trend was declining. But again, in 2016, 17, we saw a decline in the amount of mission share. So we're going to talk about it from the perspective of the fact that these are monies, again, that are received by the Synod office through the support of every congregation within the Synod. And with that, we're very appreciative that it carries on a bigger mission other than just looking at the operations of the Synod. Looking at, again, mission share, talking about the top line. You can see that in 2017, we had $3,308,000 of mission share revenue that came to the Synod in support of all the activities that we carry on for the Synod and beyond. 2018, with our amended budget now, we're looking at $3,320,000, and for 19, we're looking at $3,330,000. Those are nominal increases as we go forward, hoping that we'll see a positive growth as we go forward into those years, and looking beyond that to see, how we manage our resources based upon those numbers. Again, we do have other sources of income which we're trying to develop, and I think Pastor Bob commented on that, the fact that we're not only looking at the trend within mission share, but trying to look at alternative sources of revenue that we might be able to support the activities of the Synod and beyond. So you can see that right now in 2017, 18, and 19, we're roughly at about $200,000 of other income. And again, that's monies that come through either investment operations or through other gifts that we receive from various sources throughout the Synod and beyond. So with that, our total plan for 2019, we're expecting revenue top line of about $3,535,000. Again, this is up slightly from what we looked at in 2017 and 2018, but it's a very nominal growth. And I would call this more of a momentum type growth in comparison to what we've seen in the prior years. Again, what we're looking at with the money that is sent through to churchwide, and I'm going to explain a little bit of a difference here. Bill had indicated that our percentage was in the 46.8% range and that we were at about 1.5 million. I want to talk about it from the standpoint of the difference that we see. We are a part of an experiment. It's a good experiment, I'll say that, because it's helping us to streamline some of the processes we see in the support of our Mission Field, Nebraska ministries. We have what we call holdback. We have certain monies that the churchwide has agreed to spend upon or give us to or grant us for the operations of our Mission Field, Nebraska ministries. The number that Bill talked about was net of the holdback that we have taken and kept in Nebraska. Before we used to take the money, send it off to churchwide, and they would send it back. With the experiment now, we're streamlining that process so it cuts back on a lot of the administrative costs, but it also cuts back on the fact that the monies do not go to churchwide and then come back. So the number you see on this schedule, or on this slide, would be the money that's looked at from the standpoint of the money before the holdback that we're passing on to the churchwide operations. So with that, our numbers are showing that we'll budget for 2019 about $1.8 million that will be sent on to churchwide, again, to support operations and the global ministry of the churchwide operation. Again, that's up slightly from the prior 2 years, and this is a product of, like I say, mission share, and we're looking at about 54.1% is our percentage that we do pass through then to churchwide. Compared to what Bill was talking about from the standpoint of 1.5 and 46.8. I will say that even with the reductions of the holdback that we're seeing, we do provide probably the number one support for churchwide in our ministry and support of churchwide through our gifts to churchwide. So looking at the other ministries that we have throughout the Nebraska Synod, and there are numerous ministries that we support through our operating budget. Again, you'll look at this as a trend in 2019, down slightly compared to where we've been in the past couple of years. We were at $717,000 in 2017 and $706,000 in 2018 in our budget this year. And what we're looking at for 2019 of about $696,000, which does equate to slightly over 20%, almost 21% of money that we use to support the various ministries. And I'll go through the list of items you see here. We have those ministries, and there's a whole list that you'll see in the detail. We have made some reductions in our support this year. We've made a few allocation changes in our support to be more responsive to the need we have within these organizations that we do support through our operating budget of the Synod. Skipping over quite a bit, we'll go down to what we call the leadership ministries. And again, these are ministries that we have to support in the development through candidacy, through Operation IDEA. One item that we've added for 2019 that we've not had in our budget previously, and this is in support of the Parish Ministry Associate Program. This is a growing program. It's becoming very important to our state, the Synod. This year, I think we have 17 people in the PMA program, and it's a growing program that we felt that we need to continue to support. They have been funded pretty much on their own in the past. We've supported them through some donations and contributions, but we felt that we should support the PMA program as we move into 2019. Nominally, but it is support of the program. So I think that's something we've been hearing loud and clear, that we need to find ways to develop people to assist in the different ministries throughout the state. And this is a program that's been very successful and will continue to be so. And thanks to the people who are involved with that as we go forward. But you can see the other activities we have are pretty much similar to what we had in 2017 and 2018. Again, one of the things we talk about is our staff, and I want to say, I'll reiterate that our staff is fantastic. I think they are people that work hard, work long hours, and really support the overall ministry of the Synod, support the bishop, and support all of us who are here asking them all kinds of questions. But I guess I just like to have you give them a big round of applause, because they just are super. So one of the things we look at is trying to maintain good people. Obviously, we've seen needs where we've had to make adjustments in the past to correspond to the marketplace. We know the marketplace right now is, there's a lot of jobs and not enough people in some cases, but the reality is we need to stay up. So basically what we have for 2018 and 19 is based upon the staffing level we have right now. We're showing some growth from 17, 18, or 18 to 19 because of the fact we want to certainly give the people the merit increases they're due or market increases they're due as we go forward. But we're also seeing a trend in benefits, and you're all seeing this within your churches too, I know, that benefit costs are going up. Portico, for some reason, isn't dropping our health premiums down. They're actually going up, believe it or not. But the reality of it is that's a consistent trend. The healthcare trend is not as bad as it was for a period of time, but we'd have to factor that into our benefit cost. We also want to make sure that our people are rewarded for the work they do. So we are looking at merit increases. So that's what you're seeing there is a growth from 721,000 up to 738,000 for 2019. Again, it's based upon the staffing level that we see right now and not seeing any significant growth. So with that in mind, our expense budget is relatively steady as we go from year to year. It's going up from $3,517,000 in 2018, our current year, to what we're looking at is $3,534,000. So it's a very nominal increase, and we've gone through a lot of the detail to describe what's causing that, but I think it's all money that's going to be well spent, and not only for supporting the operations of the Synod, but also supporting churchwide and also supporting the ministries we do provide throughout the state and throughout the country, basically. So with that in mind, we've accomplished a couple of things here. We had a slight loss in 2017, primarily because of the fact we accrued for some vacations that we had not booked previously. So that's the basis of showing a slight deficit in 2017. But in 2018 and 2019, we are showing basically a break-even budget for the periods that we're talking about. So we'll open it up. I guess I don't know if we do questions now, or we certainly will be available for questions later on, or this is my email at treasurer@nebraskasynod.org. So you're certainly welcome to email me if you'd like, or we'll be around to answer any questions.
But we also have time before we pass the resolution tomorrow, though we're ahead of schedule a little bit. If there are any questions that pop immediately to mind, we could take a moment or two to see, to respond to any that may come from the floor. Here's one. Two.
So we got
this looks like a setup.
On microphone number one.
Microphone one.
Let's see. Thank you very much. I believe
name and congregation, please.
Oh, sorry. Pastor Al Duminy, Sinai Lutheran, Fremont, Nebraska. Was interested if you could share a little bit more about why the reduction in the grant to Midland University.
Yeah, the question is the reduction in the amount to Midland University. Is it okay if I take this? I'm sorry, I'm stepping on your... Yeah, the whole Mission Field Nebraska or Nebraska Ministries section of your budget, you'll see there's been some shuffling. Midland University's amount, our direct Synod to Midland support was reduced from $17,000 to $5,000. That was in conversation with Midland. The board of directors there were very supportive of the reality that we have a number of ministries among people in poverty that we support with those funds. And so they were supportive of, and again, they were very gracious and said, we could go to zero if you wanted us to. We said, if we gave you $5,000 and earmarked it for ELCA students from Nebraska Synod congregations, scholarships, would that work for you? They said yes. So we felt that was a compromise that would show support to Midland and emphasize the Synod connection and work. That's where that number came from. Mm-hmm.
Microphone number two.
Hi, David Coker from Rejoice Lutheran Church in Omaha. And in addition to being a voting member of the conference, I'm also executive director at Nebraska Lutheran Outdoor Ministries. I wanted to speak to the reduction that NLOM is going to suffer here, around what is it, $7,000 or $8,000. I made an assumption that turns out not to be true. Bishop Moss very graciously came out to my office and talked to me about the fact that the budgeted amount was going to be reduced for NLOM. And I made an assumption. I didn't ask the question, but I made an assumption that all of our serving arms were going to share in the reduction, in the need to reduce. And then when I saw this in the budget proposal, I was stunned. Every single ministry in the entire budget is either getting an equal amount or more, with the exception of two places, Midland University and the camp. So I would like to basically ask a similar question to what Pastor Duminy was asking, and that is, why us, for one thing? And I just want to lift up what I think is the value of Nebraska Lutheran Outdoor Ministries to this assembly. We are a real pipeline generating people going on to seminary. It's a critical thing that we have as a gift to the church. And I think it's probably, I just think it's a bad idea that I feel like we've kind of been picked on here, and I don't know why.
So if you want to go. And Dave, we
Obviously, we're eager to be the first to respond. That's the right question to ask, Dave. And outdoor ministry has been a priority for Nebraska Synod since the days of Circle R 40-odd years ago. And we do recognize that camping ministry and campus ministry are two largest sources of rostered ministers in this church. And nationally, as you know, significant cuts were made a number of years ago, which I think was a mistake. Synods have had to pick up that funding. When we made those difficult decisions, when the Budget and Finance Committee did, it's like having children and allocating resources among all of your children. And how do you do that fairly? We were mindful of a couple of things, and this doesn't justify or rationalize it. It went into the decision. One is the awareness of the financial situation that NLM is very fortunate to be in right now as a result of very hard work by you and your staff. Virtually no debt, and having completed another successful capital campaign and now rolling into another one. That's a ministry that has proven its ability to generate resources for its ministry. The other is that even at the level to which we have cut, Nebraska still remains near the top of those synods that provide financial support to camping ministries in their synod. And so I think I'm accurately reflecting the conversation. The sense was we don't want to make a decision at all. If we have to make one, this is the one relative to other ministries among those in poverty and so forth that we could most easily live with. Didn't like it, but that's where that came from. I think that's accurate to.
And I think, Dave, too, in looking at the value of the camp, the outdoor ministries, we all realize the importance that the camp and the outdoor ministries do provide to the Synod. And it's a very difficult discussion we had to contemplate, where we would need to look at reallocating our resources. And I think we all felt that at this point that was the right decision to make. I understand your thought in the fact that you were cut along with Midland. But in those areas, we did make some tough decisions, and that was our thoughts going forward. So,
what it can't be seen at is a lack of gratitude or recognition on the part of the Synod leadership of the outstanding partner NLM continues to be to all of the Synod's ministries. It was just a tough call, and that's where it ended up.
Could I
Yeah, please.
Okay. I think it would have been helpful to us if we had been called into conversation about this rather than folks who are not knowledgeable of every detail of our finances making those decisions. I think it would surprise people here probably that we have a certain amount of money in our income budget on a bequest line. That requires someone to die. Nobody has died this year that have left something for us, and it's a fairly substantial amount. So our budget, our operating income this year is probably going to fall short of our expenses by quite a bit. So this makes things a little, even tougher. And then I wanted to draw your attention to the revenue side, where development income is budgeted for $15,000. The question I have is, what is that $15,000 costing us to get?
So the $15,000 you see in our operating budget is not the total development activity. This is only the portion that's there for unrestricted activities or to be used for where it's needed most. So the reality of the fact is that not only is there a portion of the monies that are raised through development in the operating budget, we also have other activities that are outside the operating budget that are being funded through development. So, you have to look at the whole picture, and I don't have those numbers present right now, but the reality of it is that our development group is really out there to look at the broader picture and not just what's the $15,000 within the operating budget. So.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I just want to say one more thing, and then I'll shut up and go sit down.
Actually, you've had two comments, and I'm sorry, parliamentary procedures, Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, means that I can't let you speak to the same issue again until someone else has spoken.
Oh, okay.
Although, just a second, do we have a motion on the floor? Oh, good. No. You've been granted grace, Dave.
Thank you. I would just then say to the assembly here, I hope you folks understand the value of outdoor ministry in this synod and the faith formation that happens because of it. It's not just sending a few people off to seminary every year. There is some amazing life change that happens through Nebraska Lutheran Outdoor Ministries. And so when you folks go back and consider your budgets for next year, I would encourage you to include something for the camp. Thank you.
Wholly mindful of the support that this synod has for its camping ministry, and rightly so, let me be bad cop and remind you that when there's speaking from the floor, we neither applaud nor cheer nor jeer. I know, gotta be the playground monitor. Okay, microphone one.
Pastor Ken Miller, St. Paul Lutheran, Auburn. I had a question. My understanding is this is the budgeted amount, but if people designate other funds towards these ministries, how does that affect or go into amounts those ministries receive? Like if you designate a gift towards them.
So yeah, if you actually, congregations or individuals, if monies are sent in which are restricted for certain purposes, those purposes are met. We account for those in different funds, not in the operating fund, because we can't truly count on those every year. But our obligation would be to use those monies in the way intended, and that's the way we account for all those monies that do come in. For example, for the Tanzanian ministry or for other ministries that we have, which are truly part of our ministry and mission, but we make sure that we use those monies as intended.
So, for example, if your congregation sends a check for mission share, it goes to mission share. For camp, it goes directly to camp. It doesn't go through the general fund and so forth. Microphone one. Microphone one. There we go. Microphone one.
Jim Killow, pastor at Holy Cross Lutheran Omaha. A number of times now you've made reference to these other funds. I wish you would print them in the packet so that we had some idea what those other funds were. You've made reference to our contingency fund, but nowhere is it listed. I don't know how you expect us to do the business of the Synod if you don't give us the financials.
Clarification on that. The question is good. We do have several funds which we do have on our balance sheet. One thing we did approve just slightly a while ago was the audit report for fiscal year 2016. And within that report, which is published out on the Synod website, there's a full accounting for all those funds, including LPGS, including every fund that we have. So if anybody's interested, they can go out and take a look at the audit report. And again, we do, like I say, what we're talking about today is the operating fund and not the other funds where we do receive contributions and gifts that we do use for the intended purposes. So, but a good point.
Pastor John Egan, serving at Midland University. I just thought it'd be remiss to say that our willingness to be a part of this budget is not that we are not in need of the support of other people. We are tremendously grateful for the support of the Nebraska Synod. We would be solidly within the red on our budget without the support of our alumni and donors. And we have a lot of first-generation college students who go there, who attend at Midland University. So in good governance, it is the Synod's choice to budget appropriately. Just did not want that to be misunderstood as Midland saying we don't need money, because that's certainly not true. So we're grateful for our support with the Synod, and just hope and pray to continue to grow our relationship with the Nebraska Synod. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. That nobody is telling us they don't want any of our money. But these conversations, sometimes complex, often difficult, I know are the same ones you're having in your congregations. It has to do with the reality of declining offerings. In the abundance of our God, it seems entirely possible that we could be having the opposite conversation in congregations and here at Synod Assembly. What do we do with the leftover money, with the extra money? So I look forward to that conversation next year, after you go home newly committed to giving thanks to God through generosity, through the support of the many ministries of your congregation, this synod, and our church. Are there other questions of the Budget and Finance Committee or the Treasurer? Okay. As Dan noted, his email address was posted. He and Pastor Hayden will be around throughout the rest of the assembly, as will I. We'd be glad to attempt to answer any questions as best we can. And when the resolution to pass the budget is on the floor tomorrow, there will, of course, be option for discussion then as well. Thank you very much. All right. At this time, the orders of the day would have us go to reports of the general ballot results. Those results are not yet available because the counting for those 33 ballots continues. So we hope that those will be completed by the end of this business session. However, with the Assembly's indulgence, we're going to move ahead to consideration of the resolutions before us. We're just switching a little bit on the order of the agenda. Any objection? All right. Then I would call forward the chair of the Resolutions Reference and Council Committee, Ron Gunderson, to offer his report on the resolutions before the Assembly.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
There were 3 resolutions that were received before the deadline, and there were no resolutions received after the deadline. So all of the resolutions that we will be considering today were printed in the bulletin reports. They begin on page 42 of the bulletin reports. Resolution 2018:1, and with your indulgence, I'll just read the resolves and the recommendations. Resolved that the Nebraska Synod of the ELCA will form a task force made up of at least 5, but not more than 15 pastors, other rostered leaders, and lay people all chosen by the bishop from across the Nebraska Synod to meet, discuss, and to make recommendations to the Nebraska Synod Assembly and possibly the ELCA Churchwide Assembly to strengthen the commitment of the church in addressing the political, social, and ideological divisiveness in our society through our faith, and to discuss how to better equip pastors and others to effectively preach and teach prophetically to a world in need. Resolved that said task force meet at least 4 times in person, via phone conference, or through electronic media between now and the next Synod Assembly, and prepare a written report on its work to the bishop and the next Synod Assembly with recommendations and resolutions, if any. It is a recommendation and rationale of the Nebraska Synod Council that Resolution 2018:1 not be adopted by the 2018 Nebraska Synod Assembly, but that the Synod's Justice, Hunger, and Global Mission Team be directed to the Synod Council by the Synod Council to identify resources that could be used by rostered leaders in dealing with ideological divisiveness in our society to assist our congregations.
A reminder that when resolutions are submitted in advance of the deadline, they go to the Resolutions Reference and Council Committee for review, for constitutional muster, and so forth. A recommendation is made by that committee to the Synod Council, which then forwards that same recommendation or revised recommendation to the Synod Assembly. This resolution has been moved, put forward to you, and the recommendation is that it not be adopted. That is not final, that is not a vote, that's a recommendation. Is there a second for this resolution to bring it to the floor for discussion?
Doesn't need one. I'm sorry. Dr. Parliamentarian, it doesn't need one.
Okay. Thank you. Because it has gone through, beat the deadline, and was forwarded by Synod Council, it does not need a second. Therefore, it is on the floor before us. And I see microphone number 2, the resolution's author is here to speak. Microphone 2, please identify yourself.
Yes, Pastor Chuck Benchin, and I'm proud to serve at Emmanuel Lutheran Church. I would move to amend the resolution and replace the 2 resolves. And I believe that amendment has gone to the committee, and they have a copy of it for the screen. Is that correct? But resolved that the Nebraska Synod of the ELCA in assembly direct the Synod's Justice, Hunger, and Global Mission Team to discuss and make recommendations to the 2019 Nebraska Synod Assembly to strengthen the commitment of the church in addressing the political, social, and ideological, I can write it, but I can't pronounce it. Say it. Ideological differences in our society through our faith, and to discuss how to better equip pastors and others to effectively preach and teach prophetically to a world in need of justice. And then further amend it by substituting the second resolve with, and be it further resolved that the Justice, Hunger, and Global Mission Team report on its work to the bishop and the 2019 Nebraska Synod Assembly with recommendations and resolutions, if any.
All right, do you need to see or hear those again before we look for a second? Or is there someone willing to second the resolution, the amendments? I have a second. Okay. So, we are now debating the amendment before you, not the resolution, but the amendments to the resolution, which would substitute for the final 2 resolves, the resolves on the screen. Let me suggest that we look at the second one first, because it's pretty straightforward. It says that the Justice, Hunger, Global Mission Team report on its work over the course of the next year to this assembly next year with any of its recommendations. Clear on that? Pretty straightforward. So then let's back up to the first resolved, which is longer and more detailed and strikes me as more the meat of the matter. Pastor Benchin, you have proposed this amendment. Would you care to speak to it?
I am 60 years old, And for 50 of those 60 years, I have been actively engaged in justice, in the pursuit of justice, and working in justice ministries. I have worked with the Nebraska Synod as a minister directing a justice ministries program. The thing that I finally come to discover is that it is impossible for us, as much as we talk about it, it is impossible for us to pursue justice as we are called in our constitutions to do without being prophetic. What do I mean by being prophetic? A prophet is not somebody who predicts gloom and doom, but a prophet is someone who looks at our society and says, this is not consistent with what God is asking us to do. We need to have those intentional conversations, because I would bet that there are a number of you in this room who are Republican. I bet that there are a number of you in this room who are Democrat. I bet that there are a number of you in this room who are independent. But I know for sure that all of you in this room are Lutheran Christians, and that we ought to be talking about these issues that are dividing us, so that we can go forward as a people of God and say, this is what ought to happen in our public policy. And I think it's critical that we have an intentional discussion about this, and to lift that prophetic voice. It's not comfortable. It's not easy. But you know what? The kids in Flint, Michigan are still drinking water with lead in it. And what we're doing is we're pointing the finger of blame at other people. Oh, it's the Democrats' fault. It's the Republicans' fault. You know what? It's our fault. It's our fault. And if we want kids to have clean water, if we want kids to not be separated from their families at the border, we have to step up. And I've lost all faith in political parties. But I do have faith in this church, and I have faith in God. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Benchen. Microphone 1, speaking to the amendment. Oh, white card, please identify yourself.
Pastor Rick Johnson, St. Paul's Lutheran Church, DeWitt. Just a question of clarification for the maker. You mentioned various political parties and such. Just to clarify, this motion and the amendments, as I read them, have no political party affiliation, cause, agenda, otherwise, other than governance and justice as guided by the gospel of this church, correct?
Correct. That's my intent.
Is there any speaking to the amendment? See someone coming to the microphone. Microphone 1.
Pastor Eric Spruce Jansen, co-pastor at St. James Lutheran Humboldt. I stand in support of the amendments to this resolution. I think they clarify the other, and I also feel as a pastor, I don't always speak with a prophetic voice. And it's kind of scary for me to stand in front of everybody and admit that, even to admit that to myself. But I pray that the Justice Committee and the other committees would be able to provide resources to help me find some more bravery to speak the gospel and to speak in a prophetic voice. I speak in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Is there any other speaking to the amendment? Is anyone approaching the microphone? Microphone 1.
I'm Pastor Inba from Kuntz Memorial Lutheran Church, Omaha.
I speak in favor of the amendment, on support of the amendment, especially as the prophetic voice, as the prophets are the ones who proclaim not only forth-telling, but also forth-telling. Thus says the Lord. I think as a church, it'll be good to have support of the prophetic ministry. So I'm just in support of this amendment.
Thank you. Any further speaking to the amendment? I see no one moving to the microphone. I trust you are ready to vote. Before I do you need to have the resolutions read to you again? Please show your white card if you need to have it read to you again. Yes, okay. Would you care to read it, Ron? Or?
So this is the amendment that we're talking about, not the full resolution. So the amendment would be to substitute the first resolved with, resolve that the Nebraska Synod of the ELCA in Assembly direct the Synod's Justice, Hunger, and Global Mission Team to discuss and make recommendations to the 2019 Nebraska Synod Assembly to strengthen the commitment of the Church in addressing political, social, and ideological differences in our society through our faith, and to discuss how to better equip pastors and others to effectively preach and teach prophetically to a world in need of justice, and to amend by substituting the second resolved with, and be it further resolved that the Justice, Hunger, and Global Mission Team report on its work to the Bishop and the 2019 Nebraska Synod Assembly with recommendations and resolutions, if any.
At this time, we are voting only on these amendments to the original resolution. I would ask you to have your cards ready. Again, not voting on the resolution, but voting on this amendment. If you are in favor of this amendment, please raise your green card. Thank you. Opposed, your red card. Thank you. The motion passes. Resolution 2018-1, as amended, is now before you on the floor. Given that we have just substituted the meat of the matter with new meat of the matter, it is nonetheless before you on the floor if anyone else cares to comment against or for the resolution. Yes, microphone 1.
Patrick Sipes, St. Peter Lutheran Church in Byron. I was wanting to know if we might get someone from the Hunger Justice Committee to speak as to whether or not a year-long deadline is too short of a time, and whether that might derail some of the other important work they're doing.
Thank you for that question. The chair recognizes Pastor Rebecca Sheridan of the Hunger, Justice, and Global Mission Committee. Microphone 1.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Sheridan, pastor of Bethel Lutheran Church and chair of Micah 6:8, which is our Global Hunger Justice ministry, and we have already been talking about doing just this. And if you remember back in 2015 when we voted on our strategic vision, this was one of the goals articulated in a little bit different way, but for the 2019 Church, Synod Assembly, and so we're prepared to do this, and we have no problem doing this.
Thank you for responding. Any other questions, comments? I see a white card headed to the microphone. I'll invite you to go to microphone 1.
Sarah Paul Ramirez, St. Luke's Church, Omaha. A grammatical point, but wouldn't that read more correctly without the apostrophe in the word pastors?
Does anyone oppose to striking the apostrophe? So amended. Any other comments? Speaking to or for? Okay. We're about to vote on a resolution before us. As we do every time we vote to elect or to pass a resolution, I would ask a member of the Synod prayer team, I believe it's Pastor Sipes, to offer a prayer of discernment before we cast our green or red cards. Pastor Sipes.
Pray with me, please. Lord Jesus Christ, show us your way. As you call us to justice, as you call us to work to create the world in your vision, show us your way. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. If you are in favor of Resolution 28-1 as amended, please raise your green card. Thank you. If you're opposed, your red card. Thank you. The motion passes as amended.
Resolution 2018:2. Be it resolved that the Nebraska Synod Assembly memorialize the 2019 Churchwide Assembly of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to call upon all synods in their 2020 assemblies to include celebration and special recognition of ordained women upon the 50th anniversary of authorizing this ordination practice. And be it further resolved that the Nebraska Synod Assembly memorialize the 2019 Churchwide Assembly of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to call upon congregations throughout the ELCA to participate in the 50th anniversary of the ordination of women in our church through worship services, Bible studies, and other efforts to celebrate and recognize the importance and contributions of ordained women. And be it further resolved that the Nebraska Synod Assembly memorialize the 2019 Churchwide Assembly of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to call upon all members of this church to examine our consciences and confess our sins and complicity in whichever circumstances, by the outright or silent actions women have faced, including barriers, discrimination, or sexual harassment, as they prepared for and served as ordained women in this church. And be it further resolved that the Nebraska Synod Assembly memorialize the 2019 Churchwide Assembly of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to urge all congregations, synods, and the churchwide organization in 2020 to conduct conversations and develop strategies to promote and protect gender equity and justice, with particular focus on addressing the areas of preparation for ministry, call process, including first calls, mobility, compensation, ministry roles, and debt following seminary education. And be it further resolved that the Nebraska Synod Assembly memorialize the 2019 Churchwide Assembly of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to call upon each synod to establish goals and strategies of achieving for ordained women comparable compensation with that of ordained men in all calls by 2024, reporting the outcome of this action step at the Churchwide Assembly in 2025. And be it further resolved that the Nebraska Synod Assembly memorialize the 2019 Churchwide Assembly of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to call upon this church to establish goals and strategies in each synod of achieving for ordained women access to ministry roles where the women are currently underrepresented, with particular focus on the challenges faced by women of color receiving viable first and second calls. And be it further resolved that the Nebraska Synod Assembly memorialize the 2019 Churchwide Assembly of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America to invite the prayers of all members of this church for the successful outcome of these initiatives. It is a recommendation and rationale of the Nebraska Synod Council that this resolution is appropriate for the Assembly to discuss and take action upon.
All right, you have Resolution 2018-2 in front of you. A point of clarification, Synod assemblies may memorialize the church-wide assembly. Functions sort of like a petition. It says, we want you to take up this conversation. Doesn't direct or command. It expresses a desire that the church-wide assembly undertake these discussions and consider these decisions. Is there discussion on Resolution 2018-2? Microphone 1.
Sonny Richardson, deacon from First Lutheran in Lincoln. I would just ask for a clarification. The statement talks specifically about ordained women, and I'm wondering, in contrast to rostered women, and so I'm wondering if there's an assumption being made that by that point in time, the new suggestions for entrance rights for deacons would be using the language of ordained, or whether in fact we're talking exclusively about pastors.
Thank you. I believe I know the answer to that question, but I'm not certain. So I'm going to ask if Bill Horn has any greater clarification on that, or Diane Brower, who was a member of the drafting committee for the social statement and is the sponsor of this resolution. If either of you have clarification on that, whether ordained women is the chosen title because the assumption is deacons will be ordained by the time this is passed, or whether there's another reason it doesn't identify word and service ministers. Microphone 1.
Thanks, Bishop. I think the only thing that I can say is that the entrance right goes to the church-wide assembly for action in 2019. And so it could be a question of timing when these things hit the floor. So that's all I can say at this point.
Okay, thank you. I see Diane Brower approaching microphone 2.
Yes, and I think that upon reflection of the study done at the 45th anniversary of ordination of women that reflected how difficult it is for women to get the second and especially the third call, and the inequity in pay that they are seeing, that I think this is addressing, also recognizing that study and addressing where we are right now with women who are ordained clergy. And I think after the assembly we may have to address others, but at this point we probably can't. Or this memorial needs to address women clergy at this point until we can adopt the...
Thank you, both. That is my understanding as well, that because this commemorates the 50th anniversary of the ordination of women to word and sacrament ministry, that's what narrows the language, unless you care to offer an amendment. Any further speaking to the resolution? Seeing no one headed to the microphone, I will assume you're ready to vote. Please have your cards handy. If you are in favor of Resolution 2018-2, please raise your green card. Thank you. Opposed, your red card. Thank you. The motion passes. We have adopted Resolution 2018-2.
Resolution 2018:3. And before I read this, I'll just say that these are similar resolutions, but the reason we split them up is because the first one dealt with memorializing the church-wide assembly, and this one deals with talking to the church council. And so church-wide gave us instructions that they're to be separate resolutions. So that's why we have two. So Resolution 2018:3. Resolve that we call upon our seminaries, colleges, campus ministries, outdoor ministries, social ministry organizations, synods, and congregations to highlight women preachers, teachers, and speakers throughout 2020 in recognition of the diversity of gifts women's ordination has brought to our church. And be it further resolved that we call upon our seminaries to include intentional coursework and resources to equip pastoral leaders in identifying and ministering in situations of gender-based discrimination and violence. And be it further resolved that we call upon the Churchwide Expressions Domestic Mission Unit to develop, undertake, and successfully complete a strategy specifically related to the debt of women of color after seminary within the overall issue of debt after seminary. And be it further resolved that we call upon all candidacy committees to examine their practices in light of the findings in the 45th anniversary research. And be it further resolved that we request the office of the presiding bishop to provide in 2025 updated research on achievement of these initiatives and other matters pertinent to the full and just participation of ordained women in this church. And be it further resolved that we request all church publications to plan features in 2020 on the ordination of women, lifting up the amazing talents and gifts this church has received from its ordained women, the barriers ordained women still experience in this church, and the steps outlined in this memorial to overcome these barriers. And be it further resolved that the Nebraska Synod Assembly direct the Synod Council to forward this resolution to the Church Council's Executive Committee for referral and disposition to the appropriate unit or office of the churchwide organization in accordance with the bylaws and continuing resolutions of this church. It is a recommendation and rationale of the Nebraska Synod Council that Resolution 2018:3 is appropriate for this Synod Assembly to discuss and take action upon.
Again, to reiterate, 2018-3 comes to you without recommendation of passage or defeat. To reiterate the clarification of Ron, the earlier resolution memorialized the churchwide assembly. This resolution calls upon, directly from the Synod Council to these Synod Assembly, Nebraska Synod Assembly, to these various entities to take these actions. And the final resolve directs the Synod Council to communicate to the Church Council, to communicate to the other parties. It's unholy bureaucracy, but those are the orders it goes in. Is there speaking to this resolution? Seeing no one headed to the microphone, please grab your voting cards. All those in favor of Resolution 2018-3, please raise your green card. Thank you. Those opposed, your red card. Thank you. The motion passes. We have adopted Resolution 2018-3.
That concludes the report of the resolutions referenced in Council Committee.
That concludes the report of the resolutions referenced in Council Committee. Thank you, Ron Gunderson, and thank you all for your work. I have an update for you from the Elections Committee. While their work is not entirely complete, they are aware that there will need to be a second ballot. Not on all 33, but there will be a second ballot on at least one office. So they're asking whether we can amend the order of business so that their report comes first thing in tomorrow afternoon's business session, at which time we will take the second ballot, so that they can count it during that business session and announce the results at the end. Is there any objection to that adjustment in the schedule of business? That's what we will do. We have a couple of items yet to handle this afternoon, and virtually no other business that we can handle before tomorrow, so you'll get a little extra time before dinner from the looks of it. It was mentioned in the conversation up here about adopting the compensation guidelines and so forth that Portico didn't lower our rates any this year. That's true. It may help you to know that whereas the national average increase of health benefits was 6.5% last year, for Portico, those which you pay, it was 5% or 20% less than the national average. It's still a lot. But you need to know that Portico is a faithful ministry of the church dedicated to supporting the ministry you do in your congregations. And we have a brief 2-minute video from the president and CEO of Portico Benefits, Pastor Jeff Tiemann. I think that's queued up.
You know that ministry happens together. Portico Benefit Services, the benefit ministry of the ELCA, embodies this truth. We pool your resources with thousands of congregations and social ministries across the country to provide benefits that strengthen the financial, emotional, and physical well-being of our leaders. Together, we serve church workers so they can serve others. At Portico, we recognize the many challenges facing our church at every level. Leaders called to adapt for the future while remaining faithful to tradition. Congregations called to do more with less. A complex and uncertain healthcare and retirement landscape. Portico is always adapting to meet those needs, to equip and serve resilient leaders, and vital ELCA congregations. In the past year, we have added new personalized support for our plan members as they manage their health and well-being, plan for retirement, navigate transitions, and equip themselves to do God's work. Because the right support gives our rostered ministers and lay employees the confidence and resilience they need to care for others. In Portico, congregations have a benefits partner you can trust, offering guidance and expertise, one-stop benefits administration, healthcare rates below the national trend, and church benefits designed to simplify the call process. We apply our expertise and talents for the good of the whole church to multiply your purchasing power and amplify your voice. Recognized for top quality service, we work with you and for you, not for profit or commission. I am proud to lead this ministry of the ELCA and grateful to witness the many ways that your investment in Portico benefits achieves good outcomes as church together. Thank you for trusting Portico to care for your leaders and be good stewards of your resources. Through our work together, God creates abundant life for those who serve.
All right, the next piece of information we have to share with you has to do with the strategic vision we adopted as a synod in 2015. Each year, we have adopted a theme for the year. That theme is kicked off in Synod Assembly and wraps up at the following Synod Assembly when the new theme kicks off. I would like to call forward, I lost my place, Pastor Nathan Metzger and Pastor Peggy Hall to share with us the handoff from the theme We Are Lutheran to We Are Church Together.
Good afternoon. A few years ago, Presiding Bishop Elizabeth Eaton spoke on 4 emphases to describe who we are as the ELCA, and those 4 emphases were we are church, we are Lutheran, we are church together, and we are church for the sake of the world. Now, these emphases have become the basis for Lenten materials shared throughout the Synod for the last few years. Last year's the Synod took up the topic, we are Lutheran. And I want to thank those who helped compile the resources used in that material. Pastors Scott Fredrickson, Emily Johnson, Courtney Wilder, Heather Brown, Amanda Talley, Juliet Hampton, and Tim Custer. Thank you for all your help in these efforts. And now, with that, we will pass this on to our next group.
Greetings, Nebraska Synod. Hi. Goodbye. We are here to represent, we are church together. We are the new working group, and we are pleased to present to you our theme for Lent 2019.
When we had our very first meeting, we spent a lot of time talking about what it means to be church together. What does it mean that Jesus has brought all sorts of different people together and made them a part of one family?
To answer these questions, we decided we needed to start with Scripture. So a reading from Galatians chapter 3. For in Christ Jesus you are all children of God through faith. There is no longer Jew or Greek. There is no longer slave or free. There is no longer male and female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus.
That's right. We are all one in Christ Jesus. And this amazing truth
that we are all church together has an immediate real-world effect. What we're about to read now is from the ELCA website.
We are church together.
Just as God has joined us to the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ in baptism, we are also joined to others, not only in the ELCA and the Lutheran World Federation, but in all communities of Christian faith around the world. In Christ, none of us lives in isolation from others. Jesus is our peace and has broken down the walls that divide us, walls of judgment, hatred, condemnation, and violence, and has made us into one new human community. The spiritual communion depends only on God's mercy that comes to us in the Word and sacraments. That alone is enough for unity, and so we yearn for this communion with all Christians at the Lord's table.
Again, from the ELCA website, because God gives us our unity in Christ, we are able to see and respect the diversity within Christ's body. We receive it as a gift and embrace it, rather than treating it as a threat or a problem to be solved. We strive to respect and honor the diversity of histories, traditions, cultures, languages, and experiences among us in the ELCA and in the larger Christian community of faith.
We are church together.
This is the theme of 2019. As we prepare for Lent next year, we invite you to join us in wrestling with this truth, that even though we all are very different, we all belong to Christ and in relationship with one another. You can help us as a synod get ready for Lent 2019 by signing up to write a short devotion based on selected passage from Scripture. We especially encourage delegates and particularly lay people to participate. We have a sign-up sheet with room for 50 participants, so please stop by our table at the Synod office.
We will be releasing this 2019 Lenten devotional that you have helped write, along with a resource booklet similar to the ones from the previous working groups, We Are Church, We Are Lutheran. We hope that all of this will encourage us as a synod to discern the Spirit, and it's calling us back again and again into community as church together.
Grace and peace to you, Nebraska Synod. And don't forget, we are the church. Together.
Thank you all. That sign-up sheet is near the Synod office. If you would be willing to draft a devotion for that resource, please do so. We would love to hear from you. At this time, we will conclude. Yes, question. Microphone 2.
Ruth Betcher, retired pastor, member of Trinity Lutheran in Newman Grove. I had the opportunity to work with a congregation that was in transition, and their worship and music committee puts together the midweek Lenten service. They struggled this year. The difference between what was received this year and the prior year is the prior year had more worship components to it than this past year did. And so for the coming year, at least one congregation would like to see more worship component as a part, not just the devotions, but some more structure to be able to work with.
Okay,
Yeah.
so noted. Thank you. All right, our business then, at least that we're able to conduct, is concluded, so this business session will come to a close. I will yield to Vice President Dara Troutman.
Thank you, and sometimes they say you need to hear things 7 times in order to remember them. So my script says I'm to remind you that the We Are Church Together working group is planning a Lenten devotional. And so if you are among the 50 individuals that they need to help with this resource, we'd please invite you to stop by the Synod office space here in the lobby, pick up your scripture, and receive your writing instructions, because we are the church together. The Partners in Ministry banquet in the Crystal Ballroom across the hall will begin at 5:30. This event is by ticket only for those who have purchased tickets. Please check in at the tables in the hallway outside the ballroom to pick up your ticket to enter the banquet room. And those of you who are being honored this evening, we would ask that you please stop at the tables inside the Crystal Ballroom as well. For those of you who have not purchased a ticket for tonight's banquet, you're encouraged to dine at a local eating establishment with those who are seated around you. A guide to area restaurants is available at the Synod office desk in the lobby. There will be an open AA meeting at 9 o'clock tonight at the Sozo restaurant located at the Holiday Inn. Please remember that the 5K run and walk is tomorrow at 7:30 in the morning. You are ambitious. Registration will open at 7 o'clock outside the Eunice Center main lobby doors. Those of you who are involved with setting up exhibits for tomorrow morning's ministry fair, you will be able to begin setting up at 7 o'clock in the morning. For more information, you can check in at the Synod office across the hall in the lobby. A reminder that the Synod Ministry Fair is scheduled to begin at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Bring your passports and get them stamped so that you can be eligible for one of the great prizes being given away. This is audience participation time. First prize is an iPad. Second prize, a $100 Visa gift card. And third prize is a free registration to the 2019 Synod Assembly. Thanks for indulging me. Your name tag is what will get you into lunch tomorrow. Please be sure to have it on. The ministry fair runs from 9 until 11:30. We will convene for business tomorrow following lunch at 12:30. And as the bishop announced just a short time ago, we will begin with the announcement of the election results and the second ballot for those positions that are needed. Please enjoy your evening. Some of you will see you at the 5K run and walk tomorrow morning at 7. Others will see you a little later in the morning at the ministry fair. Have a nice night.